At Thanksgiving, my brother mocked me for still being single. I said, I'm married. The room froze as I showed proof when my brother saw who my wife is. He collapsed, crying and begging. The mashed potatoes were getting cold. I noticed because I'd been staring at them for the better part of 10 minutes, watching the butter congeal into a pale yellow pool at the center of the mound. My mother had made them the way she always did, with too much cream, too much salt, the kind of indulgence that's supposed to feel like love, but mostly just sits heavy in your stomach. The dining room was warm, too warm, the kind of heat that comes from too many bodies packed into too small a space, all of them pretending this was normal, that we did this every year, that we were the kind of family who gathered around tables and gave thanks. We weren't, but here we were anyway. My brother Derek sat across from me, his wife Jennifer perched beside him like an ornament, her smile so practiced it could have been painted on. Their two kids, I could never remember their names, which probably said something about me, were in the living room with tablets, blessedly silent. My mother fluttered between the kitchen and the dining room, her anxiety manifesting as perpetual motion. My father sat at the head of the table, carving the turkey with the kind of precision he had always reserved for things that couldn't talk back. And me? I was there because I had made the mistake of answering my mother's call 3 weeks ago when she'd said, "It would mean so much if you came this year," in that voice that made me feel like I was personally responsible for every disappointment she'd ever experienced. So here I was, single, 32, still working the same job I'd had for 5 years, still living in the same apartment, still driving the same car. In my family, this constituted failure. "Michael," my mother said, setting down a basket of rolls that no one would eat, "you look thin. Are you eating?" "I eat, Mom." "He probably lives on ramen and beer," Derek said, reaching for the gravy. "Bachelor life, right, Mike?" I didn't correct him about the nickname. I'd given up on that years ago. "I cook," I said quietly. "Sure you do." Derek's smile was the kind that didn't reach his eyes. "Remember when you tried to make that birthday cake for Mom and set off the smoke alarm?" I was 12. Some things don't change. Jennifer laughed, this tinkling sound that seemed designed to fill awkward spaces. My mother smiled nervously. My father said nothing, which was his way of saying everything. The thing about family gatherings is that everyone has a role to play. Derek was the successful one, VP at some tech company, 6-figure salary, house in the suburbs with a 3-car garage. Jennifer was the perfect wife, PTA president, marathon runner, Instagram aesthetic personified. Their kids were the perfect kids, honors students, soccer players, future leaders of America. And me? I was the cautionary tale. "So, Michael," Jennifer said, her voice dripping with the kind of false interest that made my teeth ache, "are you seeing anyone?" There it was, the question that came up every single time, without fail, like clockwork, like a debt collector, like a test I was perpetually failing. "Not at the moment," I said, which was technically true depending on how you defined moment. Derek snorted. "Still playing the field, huh? Or is there even a field left at this point?" "Derek," my mother said, but it was weak, performative. "I'm just saying," he continued, warming to his topic the way he always did when he sensed weakness. "At a certain point, you have to wonder if the problem isn't everyone else, you know? Like maybe it's time to lower those standards. Not everyone can afford to be picky." He said it like he was offering advice, like he was helping. "I'm doing fine," I said. "Are you, though?" He leaned back in his chair, one hand resting on his stomach like a satisfied emperor. "Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you're still stuck in the same place you were 5 years ago. Same room, same apartment, same everything. And now you're 32 and alone. That's got to be rough." The temperature in the room seemed to drop despite the oppressive heat. My mother made a small sound, something between a gasp and a cough. Jennifer's smile had frozen on her face. My father continued carving the turkey, each slice precise, mechanical. "Derek," I said slowly, "you don't know anything about my life. I know you're still single," he said. "I know you're still working that dead-end job. I know you're still driving that same beat-up Honda. I mean, come on, man. At some point, you have to face reality. Not everyone gets the happy ending." He said it with pity. That was the worst part. Not anger, not malice, just pity, like I was some stray dog he had found by the side of the road. Too damaged to save, but too pathetic to ignore. Something inside me shifted. It wasn't anger exactly. It was more like a door opening, a decision being made, a line being crossed that I'd been standing at for years without realizing it. Actually, I said, my voice calm, almost conversational, I'm married. The room didn't just go quiet, it went still. The kind of stillness that happens when time itself seems to pause, when the air becomes thick with the weight of words that can't be unsaid. Derek's fork stopped halfway to his mouth. Jennifer's hand froze on her wine glass. My mother's mouth formed a small O of surprise. Even my father looked up from the turkey. What? Derek said finally. I'm married, I repeated, and I was surprised by how steady my voice sounded, how calm I felt. Have been for 6 months. You're lying, Derek said, but there was something in his voice now, something uncertain. Am I? You would have told us, my mother said, her voice rising with a mixture of hurt and confusion. You would have invited us to the wedding. You wouldn't just, wouldn't I? I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw the woman who'd spent 32 years comparing me to my brother, who'd called Derek's accomplishments blessings and my struggles phases, who'd asked me at least once a year when I was going to settle down and get serious about life. I pulled out my phone. It was a calculated move, this. I'd known this moment would come eventually, in some form, at some gathering, during some holiday where Derek felt the need to remind everyone of the hierarchy we'd established years ago. I just never imagined it would feel this easy. I opened my photos, scrolled to the album I'd labeled simply E, and selected a picture. Then I turned the phone around so everyone could see them. The photograph showed me in a dark suit, standing next to a woman in a simple white dress. We were on a beach, the ocean behind us, the sun setting in shades of gold and orange that looked almost fake, too beautiful to be real. She was laughing at something, her head tilted back, her hand in mine. I was looking at her like she was the only thing in the world worth seeing. This is my wife, I said quietly. My mother reached for the phone with trembling hands. She stared at the screen, her face cycling through confusion, disbelief, and something else. Something that looked almost like fear. This is, she started, then stopped. Let me see, Derek said, grabbing the phone from her hands. He looked at the screen. His face went pale. No, he said. No, that's not, you can't. Can't what? I asked. He looked up at me, and I saw something I'd never seen in my brother's eyes before, genuine fear. That's Elena, he whispered. Yes, I said, that's my wife, Elena. Jennifer leaned over to look at the phone, and I watched her face change as recognition hit. Oh my God, she breathed. I don't understand, my mother said, looking between us. Who is Elena? Why does everyone... She's Derek's boss, Jennifer said quietly. The CEO of his company. The silence that followed was different from before. This wasn't the silence of surprise. This was the silence of a bomb going off, of a world being rearranged, of everything everyone thought they knew being revealed as fiction. Derek was still staring at the phone, scrolling now through the album. I'd left it unlocked deliberately. There were dozens of photos, us at dinner, at the beach house in Paris, at charity galas, in bed on lazy Sunday mornings. A life documented in pixels and light. This isn't real, Derek said, but his voice was hollow. This is photoshopped or... It's real, I said. We got married in March. Small ceremony. Just us and a few close friends. You weren't invited. But she's... Derek's voice cracked. She's a billionaire. She's one of the most powerful women in tech. She's my wife, I finished. He looked at me like he was seeing me for the first time, like I'd been a stranger wearing his brother's ways for 32 years and was only now revealing my true form. How? He managed. How did I meet her? I smiled, and it felt strange on my face, this expression of quiet satisfaction. Or how did someone like me end up with someone like her? Because those are different questions, Derek. Both, he said desperately. I need to know both. I took my phone back, locked it, and slipped it into my pocket. The turkey was definitely cold now. The mashed potatoes had formed a skin. The rolls sat untouched in their basket. Thanksgiving dinner. Ruin. Or saved, depending on your perspective. We met at a coffee shop, I said, sitting back in my chair, getting comfortable because this was going to take a while, and I wanted to savor it. 2 years ago, she was there with her laptop, working on something, taking up a corner table. I was there reading. She spilled her coffee. I offered her napkins. We started talking. That's it, Derek said. You just talked? We talked for 3 hours, I said, about books, mostly. She just finished reading this obscure science fiction novel I'd recommended to a friend online. Turned out she was in that same online book club. We'd been talking for months without knowing who each other was in real life. And she just fell for you? Derek's voice was heavy with disbelief, with something that sounded like betrayal, like the universe itself had wronged him. Eventually, I said, we became friends first, best friends. We'd meet at that coffee shop every week, sometimes twice a week. She never told me who she was. I never asked. She was just Elena, smart, funny, kind. She liked bad puns and good whiskey and old movies. She could quote Vonnegut from memory. She cried during sad commercials. But she's the CEO, Derek started. Of your company, I finished. I know. She told me about 6 months into our friendship. She was terrified I'd change how I treated her, that I'd start seeing her as this thing instead of a person. But I didn't, because to me, she was still just Elena, the woman who laughed at my stupid jokes and who texted me pictures of her breakfast and who called me at 2 in the morning when she couldn't sleep. I could see it on their faces now, the story settling into their understanding, the reality of it becoming impossible to deny. We dated for a year before we got engaged, I continued. She proposed, actually, on that same beach where we got married. She said she'd never met anyone who saw her the way I did, who made her feel like herself instead of like a role she had to play. She said I made her feel safe. Derek's hands were shaking, actually shaking. Does she know? He asked hoarsely. Does she know you're my brother? I smiled then, really smiled, and it must have been a terrible thing to see because Derek actually flinched. Of course she knows, I said softly. I told her everything. About you, about these dinners, about the comments, about the comparisons, about how you've spent our entire lives making sure I knew exactly where I ranked in the family hierarchy. Michael, my mother started, that's not fair, isn't it? I looked at her and I felt a strange sort of peace, the kind that comes from finally saying the things you've kept locked inside for years. Derek's right about one thing. I do still work the same job I had 5 years ago. Want to know why? Because I love it. I'm a librarian, Mom. I help people find stories that change their lives. I make minimum wage and I drive a beat-up Honda and I live in a small apartment. And I'm happy. I've always been happy. But none of you could see that because happy doesn't look like success to you. Success looks like Derek. The house, the car, the job title, the perfect family. The things you can show off to your friends at Bridge Club. That's not true, my mother said, but even she didn't sound convinced. I spent 32 years thinking there was something wrong with me, I continued, my voice still calm, still steady, even as I felt something cracking open inside my chest. Thinking I wasn't enough because I didn't want the same things Derek wanted. But Elena saw me, really saw me, and she didn't want me to change. She just wanted me. Derek had put his head in his hands. His shoulders were shaking. You have to understand, he said, his voice muffled. At work, she's terrifying, she's brilliant and demanding, and she has impossible standards. Last month, she fired 3 executives for underperforming. She's in the news all the time. There are articles about her business, strategy, her innovation, her ruthlessness. And you're telling me that woman married you? Yes, I said simply. But why? And there it was, the question under all the other questions. The one Derek was really asking. Why you and not me? Because I never wanted anything from her except her company, I said. Because I bought her as Elena, not as a CEO or a billionaire or a ladder to climb. Because when she was with me, she could just be. Jennifer was crying silently, tears running down her carefully made-up face. My mother looked like she'd been slapped. My father had stopped carving the turkey and was staring at his hands. Derek looked up at me and his eyes were red. "She's going to find out about this," he said, his voice breaking. "About how I treated you. About what I said. She's going to—" "She already knows," I said gently, almost kindly. "I told you, Derek, I tell her everything. She knows exactly who you are and what you've said to me over the years. She knows about every dig, every comparison, every time you made sure I knew I wasn't good enough." The color drained from his face entirely. "No," he whispered. "No, no, no. Michael, please. You have to tell her. You have to explain that it was just family stuff, that I was joking, that I didn't mean—" "Didn't you?" I asked. He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. No words came out. "She's my boss," he finally managed. "She controls my career. If she decides that I'm—" "What?" I asked. "Not good enough? Not worth her time? Expendable?" He flinched at each word like they were physical blows. "How does it feel?" I asked softly. "Knowing that your future depends on the opinion of someone who might not think you're good enough, someone who might have already decided you're not worth the investment, someone who might see you as less than?" "Please," he said, and I'd never heard Derek beg before. It was a strange sound, wrong somehow, like hearing a language you didn't know you could speak. "Please, Michael, you have to help me. You have to tell her." "I don't have to do anything," I said. I stood up, my chair scraping against the floor with a sound like thunder in the silent room. "I'm going to go now," I said, addressing the table at large. These people who were my family by blood, but strangers in every way that mattered. "Elena's waiting for me. We're having Thanksgiving at our place. Nothing fancy, just the two of us and some friends. People who see me as I am and like what they see." I walked toward the door, and no one moved to stop me. At the threshold, I turned back. "For what it's worth," I said, looking at Derek, at his tear-stained face and shaking hands, "I haven't asked her to do anything about you. I haven't asked her to fire you or make your life difficult. I just told her the truth. What happens next? That's between you and her. That's between you and the reputation you have built, the work you have done, the person you have shown yourself to be." "What does that mean?" Derek's voice was barely a whisper. I smiled, sad and small. "It means that for the first time in your life, you're going to be judged on your own merits without the safety net of being the golden child, the favorite son, the one who could do no wrong. It means you're going to find out if you're actually as good as you think you are." I left them there, in that too-warm room with the cold turkey and the congealing potatoes, and the weight of everything unsaid finally spoken aloud. Outside, the November air was cold and clean. My car, my beat-up Honda with the dent in the passenger door and the slightly broken radio, waited in the driveway. I got in, started the engine, and pulled out my phone. Elena had texted, "How's it going?" I typed back, "On my way home. Tell you everything when I get there." Her response came immediately. "Can't wait. Love you. Love you too," I wrote back, and I meant it with every atom of my being. As I drove away from my childhood home, watching it disappear in the rearview mirror, I felt lighter than I had in years. The truth was out now, released into the world like a bird from a cage. What happened next was no longer my problem to solve. I had a wife waiting for me, a home to go to, a life I'd built on my own terms. I had enough. I had always had enough. I just hadn't realized it until someone else saw it too. The sky above was clear and full of stars, and the road ahead was mine to take. The apartment, our apartment, though I still sometimes caught myself thinking of it as Elena's place, was on the 43rd floor of a building made almost entirely of glass and steel. Floor-to-ceiling windows looked out over the city, which at night became a sprawl of lights like stars that had fallen to earth and gotten stuck there, still shining, still hoping to find their way back to the sky. I'd lived in a studio apartment with water-stained ceilings and a radiator that clanked like it was trying to communicate in Morse code. When Elena first suggested I move in with her, I'd laughed. actually laughed, because the idea seemed absurd. Me, with my library salary and my student loans and my collection of secondhand furniture, living in a penthouse that probably cost more per month than I made in a year. Why is that funny? She'd asked, genuinely confused, sitting across from me in our coffee shop, the one where we'd met, the one we still returned to every Sunday morning like pilgrims to a shrine. Because look at this place, Elena. Look at where you live, and then look at me. She'd reached across the table and taken my hand, her fingers warm against mine. I am looking at you, she'd said quietly. I've been looking at you for a year now, and I like what I see. So please move in with me. Not because of what I have or where I live, but because I want to wake up next to you every morning and fall asleep beside you every night. Because I want to build a life with you. Because you're the only person I've ever met who makes me feel like I'm home. I'd moved in 3 days later, bringing with me 2 suitcases of clothes, a box of books, and a collection of fears I'd never named out loud. Now, as I rode the elevator up to the 43rd floor, I felt those fears dissolving like sugar in water. The Thanksgiving dinner sat in my stomach like a stone, but it was a good weight, somehow, the weight of finally standing up, of finally speaking, of finally being seen. Elena was in the kitchen when I walked in, her back to me, wearing jeans and one of my old sweaters that hung loose on her frame. She was barefoot, her dark hair pulled up in a messy bun, and she was humming something off-key while she stirred something on the stove. This was Elena without the armor. No power suits, no carefully styled hair, no mask of controlled perfection she wore in boardrooms and on magazine covers. This was just Elena. My Elena. "You're back early," she said without turning around. "I figured you'd be there at least another hour, suffering through dessert and passive-aggressive comments about your life choices." "Change of plans," I said, dropping my keys on the counter. She turned then, wooden spoon still in hand, and her smile faded when she saw my face. "What happened?" I crossed the kitchen and wrapped my arms around her, pulling her close, breathing in the smell of her shampoo and the spices from whatever she was cooking, and something that was just her, just Elena, the scent I'd come to associate with safety and home and everything good in the world. "I told them," I said into her hair. She went still. "Told them what?" "About you, about us, about being married." I felt her exhale, a long, slow breath that seemed to carry a relief and apprehension in equal measure. "How did they take it?" "Derek collapsed," I said, pulling back so I could see her face. "Not literally, but close. He went pale, started shaking, begged me to tell you it was all a joke, that he didn't mean any of it." Elena's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes, something cold and sharp. "Did he? He knows I've told you everything," I continued, "about the comments, the comparisons, the constant reminders that I'm not enough. He knows you know exactly who he is and what he's said to me over the years." "Good," Elena said quietly, and there was no warmth in her voice now, just that steel core I'd seen in interviews, in board meetings, in moments when she stopped being the woman who cried at sad commercials and became the CEO who'd built an empire from nothing. "Elena," I said carefully. "What?" She turned back to the stove, stirring more vigorously than necessary. "What are you going to do?" She was quiet for a long moment, and I watched the tension in her shoulders, the tight line of her jaw. Finally, she set down the spoon and turned off the burner. "Come here," she said, taking my hand and leading me to the living room. We sat on the couch, cream-colored leather that had cost more than my car, and she curled up against me, her head on my chest, my arm around her shoulders. "When you first told me about Derek," she said quietly, "about how he treated you, how the whole family treated you, I wanted to fire him immediately. Did you know that?" I suspected. "You asked me not to. You said it wouldn't solve anything, that it would just confirm everything they already believed about you, that you couldn't succeed on your own, that you needed someone else to fight your battles, that you were weak." I remember. So I didn't. But God, Michael, it's been hard. Having him in my office, listening to him talk about synergy and market disruption and all that corporate bullshit, knowing that this is the man who spent 32 years making you feel small, knowing that he goes home every night to a family that celebrates his success while treating yours like a failure. What I do isn't a failure, I said, and I was surprised by the conviction in my voice. I know that, Elena said fiercely, sitting up to look at me. You're a librarian. You help people. You make a difference in lives every single day. You recommended a book to a teenager last month who wrote you an email saying it saved her life. You run a reading program for underprivileged kids. You preserve history and give people access to knowledge and create safe spaces for people who need them. What you do matters, Michael. It matters more than anything Derek has ever done or will ever do. But it doesn't pay 6 figures. Who gives a shit about 6 figures? Elena's eyes were blazing now. You know what Derek does? He optimizes. He streamlines. He finds ways to cut costs and maximize profits, which usually means finding ways to pay people less or fire them entirely. He's good at his job, I won't deny that. He's very good at making the company money. But at the end of the day, what has he actually created? What has he given to the world besides shareholder value? She stood up, pacing now, her hands moving as she talked, her whole body animated with a passion I'd seen before but never directed at my behalf. You want to know what I'm going to do about Derek? She said. I'm going to judge him exactly the way I judge every executive in my company, by his work, by his results, by the value he brings. Nothing more, nothing less. I'm not going to fire him because he's a shitty brother. I'm not going to promote him because he's married to you. I'm going to evaluate him fairly, which is more than he ever did for you. She stopped pacing and looked at me, and her expression softened. But I'm also going to watch him very carefully. Because here's what I've learned in 15 years of running companies, Michael. How someone treats the people they have power over tells you everything about who they really are. And Derek treats you like you're less than him. Which means I need to know, does he treat other people that way too? The assistants, the junior employees, the people who can't fight back? I never thought about that, I admitted. That's because you're not vindictive, Elena said, sitting back down beside me. You're not looking for ways to hurt him, but I'm not interested in hurting him either. I'm interested in the truth. And if the truth is that Derek is the kind of leader who demeans people, who builds himself up by tearing others down, who creates toxic environments, then he doesn't belong in my company, regardless of who his brother is. And if he's not, if he's actually good at his role and treats his team well? Elena smiled, small and sad. Then he gets to keep his job, and he learns a very valuable lesson about separating personal and professional relationships. Either way, he doesn't get any special treatment. Not positive, not negative. Just the same standards I apply to everyone else. That's fair, I said. Fair is all I've ever tried to be. Kuneme said, in business, in life, in everything. It's why I built this company the way I did. Transparent salaries, profit sharing, parental leave, mental health support, because I remember what it was like to be the person without power, without a voice, without anyone willing to fight for me. And I swore that if I ever had power, I'd use it to make things fair. I pulled her close again, kissing the top of her head. You know I love you, right? I know, she said. And you know I love you? I know. We sat like that for a while, wrapped up in each other, the city lights glittering outside the windows like a promise or a threat, depending on how you looked at them. Your phone's been buzzing, Elena said finally. In your pocket. I can feel it. I pulled it out and looked at the screen. 17 missed calls, 23 text messages, all from various members of my family. Do you want to read them? Elena asked. Not particularly. Read them anyway, she said gently. You need to know what you are dealing with. She was right, of course. She was usually right about these things, about confronting difficult truths, about not hiding from hard conversations, about facing reality instead of pretending it didn't exist. I opened the messages. My mother, Michael, please call me. I don't understand what happened. Why didn't you tell us you were getting married? Why would you keep this from your family? Please call. Another from my mother. Your brother is very upset. He's worried about his job. You need to talk to your wife. You need to fix this. My father. This is inappropriate. We'll discuss this later. Jennifer. Michael, I know Derek said some hurtful things, But you have to understand the position you have put him in. He's terrified. Please, for the sake of the family, talk to Elena. And Derek. Derek had sent 15 messages, each one more desperate than the last. Mike, please pick up. I'm sorry, okay? I'm sorry for what I said. You have to understand I didn't know. Please tell Elena, I didn't mean any of it. She's going to fire me. I know she is. I have a mortgage, Mike. I have kids. You can't do this to me. Please, I'm begging you. Just tell her it was a misunderstanding. Tell her I'm sorry. Answer your fucking phone, please. Please, Michael. I'll do anything. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Please, I set the phone down on the coffee table, screen side down, like I could somehow undo seeing the messages by hiding them from view. He thinks you're going to fire him, I said. I gathered that. Are you? Elena was quiet for a long moment. Do you want me to? I don't know, I admitted. Part of me does. Part of me wants him to feel what I've felt all these years. The fear, the inadequacy, the sense that he's not good enough and never will be. Part of me wants him to lose everything so he understands what it's like to be powerless. And the other part? The other part remembers that he's still my brother, that we used to build forts in the backyard when we were kids, that he taught me how to ride a bike, that there was a time, before everything got complicated, when he was my hero. People change, Elena said softly. I know, but maybe they can change back. Maybe if he's scared enough, if he realizes what he's been doing, maybe he'll become someone better. Elena took my hand, threading her fingers through mine. You're a better person than I am, she said. If someone had treated me the way Derek treated you, I'd want them destroyed. No, you wouldn't, I said. You'd want them to learn. You'd want them to grow. You'd want them to become the person they could have been if they'd made different choices. How do you know that? Because that's who you are, Elena. That's why I love you. You're not cruel. You're just fair. And fair doesn't mean vindictive. She laughed, this small, huffing sound that could have been amusement or exasperation or both. You have too much faith in me. I have exactly the right amount of faith in you. My phone buzzed again. Another message from Derek. I know you're seeing these, please. I can't lose this job. I can't lose everything. Please, Michael, I'll be better. I'll be a better brother. Just please help me. He says he'll be better, I said, showing Elena the message. She read it, her expression unreadable. Do you believe him? I don't know. People say a lot of things when they're desperate. They do, Elena agreed, but sometimes desperation is what it takes to see the truth. Sometimes you have to lose everything to understand what really matters. Are you speaking from experience? She smiled, but it was purely weighted with memory. I told you how I built this company, didn't I? How I started with nothing, with just an idea and a laptop and a willingness to work 18-hour days in a one-room apartment that smelled like mildew and regret. You've mentioned it. What I didn't tell you was that I had everything once. Before that, I had a fiancé, a nice apartment, a comfortable job at someone else's company. I had the life everyone said I should want. And then I lost it all. The relationship fell apart. I got laid off. I couldn't make rent. I ended up sleeping on a friend's couch, eating ramen for every meal, wondering if I'd made a terrible mistake by pursuing my own vision instead of playing it safe. I didn't know that, I said quietly. It was the best thing that ever happened to me, Elena said. Losing everything meant I had nothing left to lose. It meant I could take risks. It meant I could build something on my own terms instead of trying to fit into someone else's idea of success. It meant I could fail without it destroying me because I'd already been destroyed and survived. You think that's what Derek needs? To be destroyed? I think Derek needs to understand that his worth isn't tied to his job title, or his salary or his position in the family hierarchy, Elena said. And maybe the only way he'll learn that is by having those things threatened, not taken away necessarily, just questioned, made uncertain. She stood up and walked to the window, looking out over the city. I'm going to tell you something I've never told anyone else, she said, her back to me. When I first became CEO, when I first had real power, I was terrified of becoming the kind of boss I'd had before, the kind who saw employees as resources to be optimized instead of people to be valued. So I made a rule for myself. Before I made any major decision about someone's employment, I would ask myself 3 questions. What questions? She turned to face me, backlit by the city lights, and she looked like something out of a painting, beautiful and terrible and true. 1. Is this person actually bad at their job, or am I just personally uncomfortable with them? 2. If I fire this person, am I solving a real problem or just making myself feel powerful? 3. What would a fair person do? And Derek? Derek is very good at his job, Elena admitted. Objectively speaking, he's one of my better VPs. He hits his targets. He manages his team effectively. He brings value to the company. Personally, I can't stand him. Knowing what I know about how he's treated you makes me want to throw him out the window. But a fair person doesn't fire someone for being a shitty brother. So you're not going to do anything? I didn't say that. Elena's smile was sharp now, all edges. I said I'm not going to fire him for being a shitty brother. But I am going to have a conversation with him. I am going to make very clear that I know exactly who he is and what he's done. And I am going to make him understand that his future at my company depends on him being the kind of leader who treats people, all people, regardless of their position or power, with respect and dignity. And if he can't do that, then he'll have fired himself, Elena said simply. Not because of you, but because of who he chooses to be. She came back to the couch, settling beside me, taking my hand again. Is that fair enough for you? I thought about it, about Derek's messages, about his fear, about the years of comments and comparisons and casual cruelties, about the part of me that wanted revenge and the part that wanted reconciliation and the part that just wanted to move on and build a life that didn't revolve around proving my worth to people who'd never valued it in the first place. Yes, I said finally. That's fair. Good. Elena kissed me, soft and sweet. Now, are you going to answer any of those messages, or are we going to let them spiral into panic for a while longer? I picked up my phone and typed out a single message, sending it to the family group chat that I usually muted. I'm fine, Elena and I are fine. Derek's job is between him and Elena. I have no say in it and wouldn't interfere even if I did. What happens next is up to him. Please stop calling. I sent it and immediately muted the chat again as responses started flooding in. Done, I said, setting the phone aside. How do you feel? Lighter, I said, and it was true. Like I've been carrying something heavy for years and I finally set it down. Good, Elena said. She stood up and held out her hand. Come on, dinner's getting cold and we have friends coming over in an hour. I want you to meet them properly, not as my husband, but as you, just Michael. The man I fell in love with in a coffee shop because he gave me napkins and made me laugh and saw me as a person instead of a title. I took her hand and let her pull me up. Just Michael, I repeated. I like the sound of that. So do I, she said, and her smile was the same one I'd seen in that coffee shop 2 years ago, warm and real and meant just for me. We went to the kitchen together and she showed me how to plate the food she'd made. Nothing fancy, just pasta and salad and bread. The kind of meal I might have made in my studio apartment. The kind of food that didn't cost a fortune or require a culinary degree, but tasted like home anyway. You know what the best part of being married to you is? Elena asked as we worked side by side, her hip bumping mine, her laughter filling the space between us. What? I get to be myself, she said. No performance, no armor, no pretending, just me and you and a life we built together. That's worth more than all the money in the world. Even the billions, I teased. Even the billions, she confirmed. Though let's be honest, the billions don't hurt. We laughed, and somewhere across the city, my brother was probably panicking. My mother was probably crying. My father was probably maintaining his stoic silence. And I felt bad about that, in a distant sort of way. The way you feel bad when you hear about a natural disaster in a country you have never visited, real but removed. Someone else's tragedy, not quite your problem to solve. Because I had this kitchen, this woman, this life, this home, and that finally was enough. The doorbell rang announcing our guests, and Elena went to answer it while I finished setting the table. I could hear voices in the hallway, laughter, greetings, the sounds of friends arriving. of people who saw us as we were and liked what they saw. "Michael," Elena called, "come meet everyone." I went, wiping my hands on a dish towel, and found our living room filling with people. Authors Elena had funded, teachers from the library system I worked with, a couple who ran a bookstore downtown, a musician friend of Elena's who'd played at our wedding. These were our people, our chosen family. And as I moved among them, shaking hands and accepting hugs and falling into easy conversation about books and music and life, I felt the last of the Thanksgiving tension drain away. This was my life now. This was my family, and I had never been happier. Monday morning came too soon and not soon enough. I woke at 6 the way I always did to find Elena already up, standing by the window in her silk robe, coffee in hand, looking out over the city as it slowly came to life beneath us. The sun was just starting to rise, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold that seemed almost aggressive in their beauty, like the world was showing off. "Couldn't sleep?" I asked, my voice rough with mourning. She turned and I could see the tension in her shoulders, the tight set of her jaw. This wasn't just Elena. This was CEO Elena, the one who made billion-dollar decisions before most people had their first cup of coffee, the one who'd built an empire through strategic thinking and ruthless efficiency. "I've been thinking about Derek," she admitted. I sat up, the sheets pooling around my waist. "Having second thoughts about the fairness approach?" "No." She came back to the bed, setting her coffee on the nightstand and curling up beside me. "I'm thinking about timing. I could wait, let him stew for a few days, let the fear really sink in. Or I could deal with it today, get it over with, make my position clear." "What does your gut tell you?" She smiled slightly. "My gut tells me that leaving Derek in uncertainty is a form of cruelty. And I'm not cruel. I'm just fair." "So today then?" "Today," she confirmed. She kissed me, soft and lingering. "I have a 9 a.m. meeting with the executive team. Derek will be there. I think after that I'll call him into my office and have the conversation. Set the terms." "Do you want me to?" "No," she said firmly. "This is between him and me. You're not involved. You're not leverage. You're not a bargaining chip. You're not a factor into the decision. You're my husband, and what happens in my office stays in my office." "Okay," I said, trusting her the way I'd learned to trust her over the past 2 years. Completely, without reservation, knowing that she saw the world more clearly than almost anyone I'd ever met. She got up and moved to the closet, selecting her armor for the day. A charcoal gray suit that probably cost more than my monthly salary, crisp white blouse, heels that added 3 inches to her height and seemed designed to make a statement. I watched her transform from the woman who cried at sad commercials to the CEO who'd been on the cover of Forbes 3 times, and I marveled, as I always did, that these were the same person, that I got to see both sides, that she trusted me with the softness she showed no one else. "Wish me luck?" she asked, adjusting her collar in the mirror. "You don't need luck," I said. "You need coffee and determination, both of which you have in abundance." She laughed, and for a moment, she was just Elena again. Then the laugh faded, and the CEO was back. "I love you," she said. "I love you too. Go be terrifying." "I prefer commanding," she said, but she was smiling as she left. I lay in bed for a while after she was gone, listening to the sounds of the city waking up, thinking about Derek and what this day might bring. Then I got up, showered, dressed in my own uniform, jeans, button-down shirt, comfortable shoes suitable for a day of walking between library stacks, and headed to work. The library was quiet when I arrived, the way it always was before opening hours. I loved this time of day, the building still and peaceful, the books waiting patiently on their shelves, the sense that anything was possible, that the right story might change someone's life today if only they found it. My colleague Sarah was already at the front desk, sorting through returned books. "Morning, Michael," she said, glancing up. "How was Thanksgiving?" "Eventful," I said. "Good eventful or bad eventful?" "Both," I admitted. "Definitely both." She studied me for a moment, her eyes sharp behind her glasses. Sarah had been working at the library for 20 years and had developed an almost supernatural ability to read people. "You look different," she said finally. "Different how?" "Lighter, like you put down something heavy. Did something happen?" I thought about telling her about the dinner, the revelation, Derek's panic, Elena's plans, but it felt too raw still, too new, like a story that hadn't finished being written yet. "Just family stuff," I said. "You know how holidays are." "I do," she said, mercifully letting it drop. "Well, whatever happened, it looks good on you. You seem settled, content." Content. That was a good word for it. Not happy in the giddy, unsustainable way, but content in the deep, rooted way. The kind of satisfaction that came from knowing who you were and being okay with it. The day passed in its usual rhythm, helping patrons find books, answering reference questions, leading a children's story time, processing new acquisitions. Around lunch, my phone buzzed with a text from Elena. "Meeting done. Having the conversation with D in 10 minutes. We'll let you know how it goes." I typed back, "Good luck. Remember, fair, not cruel." "Always," she replied. And then there was nothing to do but wait. Across the city, in an office with floor-to-ceiling windows and furniture that cost more than most people's cars, Elena sat behind her desk and pressed the intercom button. "Rebecca, please ask Derek Matthews to come to my office." "Of course, Ms. Chen," her assistant replied. Elena sat back in her chair and waited. She'd spent the morning in the executive meeting, watching Derek carefully, noting the way his hands shook slightly when he held his coffee, the way his voice was just a fraction too loud when he presented his quarterly numbers, the way he avoided looking at her directly. He was afraid. Good. Fear meant awareness, and awareness was the first step toward change. There was a knock at the door. "Come in," Elena said. Derek entered, and she could see immediately that he hadn't slept. There were dark circles under his eyes, his tie was slightly crooked, and his usual confidence had been replaced by something that looked uncomfortably like desperation. "You wanted to see me?" His voice was steady, but Elena had spent years learning to read people, to see past the performance to the truth underneath. "Sit down, Derek." He sat, his posture rigid, his hands clasped tightly in his lap. Elena let the silence stretch for a moment, watching him, seeing the fear build. Then, because she wasn't cruel, she spoke. "I'm not going to fire you, Timaine," she said. The relief that washed over Derek's face was almost painful to witness. His shoulders sagged, his hands unclenched, and for a moment he looked like he might actually cry. "Thank you," he breathed. "Thank you, Miss Chen. I'm not finished," Elena said, her voice sharp enough to cut. Derek froze. "I'm not going to fire you," Elena repeated, "because you're good at your job. Your numbers are solid, your team meets their targets, and you bring value to this company. But let me be very clear about something, Derek. I know everything. I don't... Michael told me," Elena continued, as if Derek hadn't spoken, "about the comments, the comparisons, the 32 years of making sure he knew he wasn't good enough, about how you and your family treated him, about what you said at Thanksgiving dinner." Derek's face had gone pale. "Ms. Chen, I can't explain. Can you?" Elena leaned forward, her eyes cold. "Can you explain why you thought it was acceptable to mock your brother for his career choices, for being single, for not measuring up to some arbitrary standard of success that you decided mattered?" "I was just joking. Family stuff. I didn't mean..." "Do you joke like that with your team?" Elena asked, her voice dangerously quiet. "What? Do you make fun of your employees? Do you compare them to each other? Do you make them feel small so you can feel big?" "No," Derek said quickly. "No, of course not. I would never." "Then why was it okay to do it to Michael?" The question hung in the air between them, heavy and damning. "Because," Derek started, then stopped. "Because he's my brother. Because that's just how we are. How we've always been." "That's not an answer," Elena said. "That's an excuse. And I don't accept excuses, Derek. I accept results. I accept accountability. I accept people taking responsibility for their actions and their impact." She stood up and walked to the window, looking out over the city, giving Derek a moment to process, to understand the gravity of the situation. Michael asked me not to fire you, she said, still facing the window. Did you know that? He, he did? He said that despite everything, you're still his brother. That there was a time when you were his hero, that maybe if you were scared enough, you might become someone better. Elena turned back to face him. So here's what's going to happen, Derek. You're going to keep your job. You're going to continue to be evaluated by the same standards as every other VP in this company. No special treatment, positive or negative. But you're also going to do something else. Anything, Derek said. I'll do anything. You're going to apologize to Michael. A real apology, not some half-hearted, sorry you were offended bullshit. You're going to acknowledge specifically what you did wrong, how it impacted him, and what you're going to do differently going forward. I can do that. And you're going to attend 6 months of leadership coaching, Elena continued. With Dr. Patricia Huang, she specializes in emotional intelligence and inclusive leadership. You'll meet with her once a week on your own time at your own expense. And you'll do the work, Derek. Real work. Not just showing up and nodding along, but actually examining your behavior and your impact and changing. Derek nodded frantically. Yes, I'll do it. All of it. If you don't, Elena said, her voice hard as steel, if you skip sessions or half-ass the work, or I hear even a whisper that you're treating people, any people, not just Michael, the way you've been treating him, then we're done. Not because you're his brother, but because you're not the kind of leader I want in my company. I understand. I hope you do, Elena said. She moved back to her desk, sat down, and pulled up something on her computer. Because here's what else I know about you, Derek. She turned the monitor so we could see it. On the screen was a spreadsheet, names, dates, numbers. This is turnover data for your division, Elena said. Over the past 3 years, you've lost 23 employees. The company average for a division your size is 9. You want to explain that to me? Derek stared at the screen, his mouth opening and closing like a fish. I run a tight ship, high standards. Some people can't handle being devalued, Elena interrupted. I pulled the exit interview data. Want to know what the #1 reason for leaving was? Toxic management culture. Feeling underappreciated. Being compared unfavorably to colleagues. Sound familiar? Derek's face had gone from pale to gray. So here's the truth. Derek, you might not have been joking with your employees the same way you joked with Michael, but you've been creating the same environment, the same culture of comparison and inadequacy, the same message that people aren't good enough unless they meet your impossible standards. I didn't know, Derek whispered. Ignorance isn't an excuse, Elena said. It's a failure of leadership. And you're going to fix it. You're going to work with Dr. Huang. You're going to learn how to build people up instead of tearing them down. You're going to create a culture where people feel valued and supported. And you're going to do it because it's the right thing to do, not because I'm forcing you. How will you know if I'm actually changing? I'll know, Elena said, because in 6 months, we're going to look at this data again. We're going to see if turnover has decreased. We're going to do another round of anonymous employee surveys. We're going to measure not just your results, but how you achieve them. And if things haven't improved, if you're still the same leader you've always been, then you're gone. Not because of Michael, because you're not good enough. She let that sink in, the irony of it, the poetic justice, the perfect reversal. Do we understand each other? Elena asked. Yes, Derek said, his voice barely audible. Yes, Ms. Chen, we understand each other. Good, then get back to work. And Derek, next time you want to mock someone for their life choices, remember that the librarian you're mocking might be married to your boss. Derek stood on shaking legs and walked to the door. He paused there, his hand on the handle. Ms. Chen, he said quietly. Yes? Thank you for giving me a chance, for being fair. Elena's expression didn't soften. Don't thank me. Thank Michael. He's the one who believes you can be better. Prove you're right. Derek left, closing the door softly behind him. Elena sat alone in her office for a long moment, the city sprawling beneath her, the weight of leadership settling on her shoulders the way it always did after difficult conversations. Then she picked up her phone and texted Michael. "It's done, he stays. But he changes or he goes. I'll tell you everything tonight." The reply came almost immediately. "Thank you for being fair." "Always," Elena typed back. "Even when it's hard, especially when it's hard." She set down her phone and turned back to her computer, to the 100 other decisions waiting for her, the 1,000 other problems to solve. Being fair was exhausting. Being cruel would have been easier. But fair was right. And Elena had built her life, her company, her whole world on the foundation of doing what was right, even when it was hard. Especially when it was hard. The text came 3 days later, on Thursday evening, while I was making dinner. I was in the kitchen, chopping vegetables for a stir-fry, when my phone buzzed against the counter. I glanced at the screen and felt my stomach drop. "Derek, can we talk? In person? Please, oh." I stared at the message for a long moment, the knife still in my hand, the half-chopped bell snapper bright against the cutting board like a wound. Elena came up behind me, wrapping her arms around my waist, her chin resting on my shoulder. "Who is it?" "Derek," I said. "He wants to meet." "Do you want to see him?" That was the question, wasn't it? Did I want to see Derek? Did I want to hear whatever he had to say? Did I want to open that door again after I'd finally managed to close it? "I don't know," I admitted. Elena squeezed me gently. "You don't have to. You don't owe him anything, Michael. Not your time, not your forgiveness, not another chance to hurt you." "But you gave him a chance," I said. "You could have fired him. You should have fired him, but you gave him a chance to be better." "That's different," Elena said. "That was a professional decision. This is personal. What happens between you and Derek, that's up to you. Not me, not your mother, not anyone else. Just you." I set down the knife and turned in her arms so I could see her face. "What would you do if you were me?" She considered the question seriously, the way she approached everything, with careful thought and honest reflection. "If I were you," she said slowly, "I think I would meet with him. Not because he deserves it, but because you do. Because you've spent your whole life being the accommodating one, the one who absorbs the hurt and keeps quiet. And I think maybe it's time for Derek to see who you really are, to understand what he's been missing all these years by treating you like you're less than. What if he hasn't changed? What if it's just another performance? Then you walk away," Elena said simply. "You listen to what he has to say, you decide if it's genuine, and if it's not, you leave. You don't have to accept a bad apology, Michael. You don't have to pretend to forgive him if you don't. You're allowed to protect yourself." I thought about the Derek I'd known as a child, before the comparison started, before the competition became toxic. About the brother who'd taught me to ride a bike, and who'd let me sleep in his room during thunderstorms, and who'd once punched Tommy Richardson for making fun of my glasses in 3rd grade. That Derek had existed once. Maybe he still existed somewhere, buried under years of corporate ambition and family dysfunction, and the toxic belief that his worth was measured in job titles and salaries. Or maybe he didn't. Maybe people really did change, became something unrecognizable, lost themselves so completely in what they thought they should be that they forgot who they actually were. Only one way to find out. I picked up my phone and typed, "Where and when?" The response came immediately. "Tomorrow, 6 p.m., there's a coffee shop on 5th and Madison, the one with the blue awning." I knew the place. It was neutral territory, not our coffee shop, not his neighborhood, somewhere in between, somewhere that didn't carry the weight of history or hierarchy. "Okay," I typed. "I'll be there, thank you," Derek wrote back. "Thank you, Michael." I set down the phone and looked at Elena. "I'm meeting him tomorrow." "Okay," she said. "Do you want me to come with you? Wait outside, be back up in case you need an escape route?" I smiled despite myself. "Are you offering to be my getaway driver?" "I'm offering to be whatever you need me to be," she said seriously. "Getaway driver, emotional support, silent witness, or just the person who's waiting for you at home when it's over?" "The last one," I said. "Just be here when I get back. That's enough." "Always," she promised. and kissed me softly. We finished making dinner together, and we didn't talk about Derek or the meeting or what might happen. We talked about our days, about a book I was reading, about a new initiative Elena was launching at the company. Normal things. Couple things. The kind of conversation that reminded me why I'd fallen in love with her in the first place. Not because she was successful or powerful, but because she was interested, curious, engaged with the world and with me. That night, lying in bed with Elena curled against me, her breathing slow and even with sleep, I stared at the ceiling and thought about what I might say to Derek tomorrow. I thought about anger and hurt and all the years of feeling small. I thought about forgiveness and whether it was something that could be given or if it had to be earned. I thought about family and what it meant and whether blood was really thicker than water or if that was just something we told ourselves to justify staying connected to people who hurt us. Mostly, I thought about the man I'd become despite Derek, not because of him. The man who'd found love in a coffee shop and built a life around books and helping people in small kindnesses. The man who measured success not in dollars but in moments. In the teenager who'd emailed to say a book saved her life. In the elderly woman who came to the library every day because it was the only place she didn't feel alone. In the child who'd learned to read in my storytime program and had looked at me like I'd given him the world. That man didn't need Derek's approval, didn't need his validation, didn't need him to acknowledge that being a librarian was a worthy life because I already knew it was. But maybe Derek needed to hear it anyway. Maybe Derek needed to understand what he'd been wrong about all these years. Not for my sake, but for his own. I fell asleep thinking about that, about the possibility of change and redemption and whether people could really become better versions of themselves, or if we were all just stuck playing the roles we'd been assigned in childhood, over and over, until we died. The coffee shop on 5th and Madison was exactly the kind of place I would have chosen. Small, independent, shelves of used books along one wall, mismatched furniture, the smell of fresh coffee and old paper. It was the kind of place that felt like a sanctuary, like the world couldn't reach you here. I arrived 10 minutes early, ordered a black coffee, and sat at a table in the corner where I could see the door. My hands were steady as I wrapped them around the cup, feeling the warmth seep into my palms. I wasn't nervous, I realized. I thought I would be, but I wasn't. I was just ready. Ready to hear what Derek had to say. Ready to decide if it was enough. Ready to move forward, with or without him. Derek arrived exactly at 6, and I almost didn't recognize him. He'd always been meticulous about his appearance. Expensive suits, perfect hair, shoes polished to a mirror shine. But the man who walked through the door looked like he'd forgotten what polish was. His suit was rumpled, his tie slightly askew, and there was something in his face that I'd never seen before. Genuine uncertainty. He saw me and froze for a moment, like he was considering running. Then he took a breath, squared his shoulders, and walked over. "Michael," he said, "thank you for coming." "Sit," I said, gesturing to the chair across from me. He sat, ordered a coffee when the barista came by, and then we sat in silence for a moment. Two brothers who'd run out of easy conversation years ago. "I don't know how to start this," Derek said finally. "Try the beginning," I suggested. He laughed, this broken sound that could have been amusement or pain or both. "The beginning, okay. The beginning is that I've been a shitty brother to you for most of your life, and I'm sorry." I waited. "That's not enough, is it?" he said, reading my silence correctly. "Elena said it had to be specific, that I had to acknowledge what I did and how it impacted you and what I'm going to do differently. So here goes." He took a breath, and I could see him gathering courage, preparing to say things he'd probably never said out loud before. "I've spent the last 32 years making you feel like you weren't good enough," Derek said, his voice low and rough. "Every family gathering, every phone call, every conversation, I found ways to compare you to me, to point out where you were falling short, to make sure you knew that by my standards you were failing. And I told myself it was just brotherly teasing, or that I was trying to motivate you, or that it was just how our family worked. But that was bullshit." He looked at me and there were tears in his eyes. Actual tears. "The truth is, I was scared," he continued. Shared that if you were happy, actually, genuinely happy, without the things I'd worked so hard to get, then maybe those things didn't matter as much as I thought they did. Maybe success wasn't about the house and the car and the job title. Maybe it was about something else entirely, something I didn't have and didn't know how to get. Derek, I started. Please, he said. Let me finish. I need to say this. I nodded. When you showed up at Thanksgiving and told us you were married, I felt like the ground had disappeared from under me, Derek said, because suddenly you had something I didn't. This genuine, real love with someone who saw you and chose you not because of what you could provide, but because of who you were. And more than that, you had it with Elena. Elena, who I've been trying to impress for 3 years, who I've been killing myself to meet the standards of, who represents everything I thought success looked like. And she chose you. She married you. She saw something in you that apparently I was too blind to see. He wiped his eyes roughly, and my first reaction was anger. How dare you? How dare you succeed where I'd failed? How dare you have something I wanted? How dare you be happy when I'd spent years making sure you knew you weren't supposed to be? And now, I asked quietly. Now, Derek laughed again, bitter and broken. Now I'm in therapy twice a week, Dr. Huang plus another therapist, because apparently I have a lot of shit to work through. Now I'm reading books about emotional intelligence and healthy communication and how to be a better leader and a better person. Now I'm looking at the turnover rate in my division and understanding, really understanding, that I've been creating the same environment that I created with you. Making people feel like they're never enough. Making them compete for approval they can never quite earn. Making them measure their worth in metrics that don't actually matter. He met my eyes, and I saw something there I'd never seen before. Genuine remorse. I'm sorry, Michael, he said. I'm sorry for making you feel small. I'm sorry for the comments and the comparisons and the constant message that who you are isn't enough. I'm sorry for not seeing what was right in front of me. That you're happy, that you're living a meaningful life, that you're making a difference in the world in ways that matter more than quarterly earnings or stock options. I'm sorry for being so obsessed with my own idea of success that I couldn't recognize yours. The coffee shop seemed very quiet suddenly, like the whole world was holding its breath, waiting to see what would happen next. I don't expect you to forgive me, Derek continued when I didn't speak. I don't even know if I deserve forgiveness, but I want you to know that I'm trying to change. Not because Elena threatened my job, though that definitely got my attention, but because I don't want to be the person I've been. I don't want to be the brother who makes you dread family gatherings. I don't want to be the leader whose employees leave in droves because working for me is toxic. I don't want to be the kind of man who measures his worth in comparison to others instead of finding it in himself. He pulled something out of his pocket, a piece of paper, folded and refolded so many times it was soft as cloth. Dr. Huang has me writing letters, he said, sliding it across the table to me. Letters to the people I've hurt, acknowledging specifically what I did wrong. This is yours. You don't have to read it now or ever if you don't want to, but I wanted you to have it. I picked up the letter but didn't open it. Can I ask you something? Derek said. Yeah. Are you happy, really happy? Or is that just something you tell yourself because you don't have what I have? I thought about it, about my life with Elena, about my work at the library, about the apartment that was too expensive and the car that was beat up and the job that paid minimum wage and the wedding that only a handful of people attended. I'm happier than I've ever been, I said honestly. Not because of what I have, but because of who I'm with and what I do. Elena makes me feel seen. The library gives me purpose. And the money and the job title and all the things you thought mattered, they're just extras. Nice to have, but not what makes life worth living. Derek closed his eyes like I'd struck him. I wasted so much time, he whispered, chasing things that don't matter, missing what does. It's not too late, I said, and I was surprised to find I meant it. To figure out what actually matters to you, to build a life around that instead of around what you think you're supposed to want. Is it too late for us, he asked, opening his eyes, for you and me? I don't know if we can go back to how things were, but can we go forward? Can we be brothers again? Real brothers, not just people who share DNA and show up to the same holidays? I thought about it, about the bike riding lessons and the thunderstorm nights and Tommy Richardson getting punched in the face. About the brother I'd lost somewhere along the way and the stranger he'd become. And I thought about the man sitting across from me now, rumpled and tearful and genuinely, actually trying. I don't know, I said honestly. I want to believe you've changed, Derek. I want to believe this is real and not just a performance to save your job. But I've spent 32 years learning not to trust you with the soft parts of me. And that's not something that changes overnight. I understand, Derek said. But, I continued, I'm willing to see. I'm willing to give you a chance to show me that you mean this. Not because you've earned it, but because I want to believe people can change. Because I want to believe it's possible to become better than we've been. Thank you, Derek said, his voice breaking. Thank you, Michael. I know I don't deserve it, but thank you. Don't thank me yet, I said. Show me. Show me in how you treat people at work. Show me in how you talk about me to mom and dad. Show me in the choices you make and the person you become. And maybe eventually we'll find our way to something that looks like brotherhood. I will, Derek promised. I swear to you, Michael, I'll show you. We sat there for a while longer, finishing our coffee, talking about small things, Derek's kids, Elena's new initiative at work, a book I was reading that I thought Derek might like. It wasn't comfortable exactly, but it wasn't hostile either. It was tentative, careful. The first fragile steps towards something that might someday become a relationship. When we left, Derek hugged me. It was awkward and brief and felt nothing like the hugs from childhood. But it was something, a start. Thank you for meeting me, he said. And thank Michael, thank your wife. Thank Elena for being fair when she could have been cruel. I will, I said. I watched him walk away, his shoulders hunched against the cold, and I felt something shift inside me. Not forgiveness exactly. Not yet. But maybe the possibility of forgiveness. The understanding that people were complicated, that they could be both terrible and trying. Both the worst version of themselves and the person desperately attempting to be better. I pulled out my phone and texted Elena. Heading home. It went okay. Tell you everything when I get there. I'll be waiting, she replied, with mine in and takeout and whatever you need. You, I typed back. I just need you. You have me, she wrote. Always. I walked to the subway, the letter from Derek still folded in my pocket, unopened. I'd read it eventually when I was ready, when I could approach it without the weight of all the years of hurt clouding my judgment. But not today. Today, I just wanted to go home to my wife, to the life we'd built, to the future we were creating together. The subway was crowded, full of people heading home from work or out for the evening, all of us moving through the city with our own stories, our own hurts, our own hopes for becoming better than we'd been. I found a seat and sat down, closing my eyes, feeling the rhythm of the train, the movement toward home. And I thought about Derek, about his tears and his letter and his promise to change. I thought about whether I believed him, whether I should believe him, whether belief even mattered when measured against actions and time. Mostly I thought about how far I'd come from the person who'd sat at that Thanksgiving table feeling small and less than and wrong. I'd found my way to happiness not by becoming what they wanted, but by being exactly who I was. And maybe that was the lesson Derek needed to learn, that success wasn't about measuring up to someone else's standards. It was about finding your own standards and living up to those instead. The train pulled into my stop and I got off, climbing the stairs to street level, walking the 3 blocks to the building that was home, riding the elevator to the 43rd floor. Elena was waiting when I walked in, curled up on the couch with a book, 2 wine glasses and a bottle of red on the coffee table. Thai food containers from our favorite restaurant spread out like an offering. She looked up when I entered and her whole face softened. "Hi," she said. "Hi," I replied. "Come here," she said, setting down her book and holding out her arms. I went to her, collapsing onto the couch beside her, letting her wrap around me like a blanket, like safety, like home. "How was it?" she asked, her fingers running through my hair. "Hard," I admitted, "but necessary. I think he means it, Elena. I think he's really trying." "Good," she said. Everyone deserves a chance to be better. Even Derek. Even Derek, I agreed. We sat like that for a while, wrapped up in each other, the city glittering outside the windows, the food getting cold on the table. And I felt that contentment again. That deep, bone-certain knowledge that I was exactly where I was supposed to be. I love you, I said. I love you too, Elena replied. Now come on, eat some pad thai before it gets completely inedible, and tell me everything. So I did. I told her about the coffee shop and Derek's tears and his apology and the letter I hadn't read yet. I told her about the tentative hope I felt, the fragile possibility that maybe things could be different. And she listened, the way she always did, with her whole attention, her whole heart, seeing me and hearing me and making me feel like I mattered. Later that night, lying in bed with Elena asleep beside me, I finally pulled out Derek's letter and unfolded it. The handwriting was messy, hurried, like the words had poured out faster than he could write them. I read it once, then twice, then a third time. It was everything he'd said in the coffee shop and more. Specific instances where he'd hurt me, acknowledgement of how it must have felt, promises for how he'd do better. But there was something else too, something raw and honest. I've spent my whole life trying to be someone I'm not, and in the process I lost sight of who you actually were. You were never the failure, Michael. I was. I failed at being your brother. I failed at seeing you. I failed at loving you the way you deserve to be loved. Unconditionally, without comparison, just as you were. I don't know if I can fix that, but I want to try. Not for me, for you, because you deserve a brother who sees your worth. And I want to be that brother, even if it takes the rest of my life to become him. I folded the letter and set it on the nightstand, then curled around Elena, holding her close, feeling her heartbeat against my palm. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new conversations, new chances for Derek to prove himself or fail. But tonight I had this woman, this home, this life I'd built from nothing and everything. And it was enough. It had always been enough. I just hadn't needed Derek to believe it to make it true. 3 months passed like water through fingers, quick and slow at the same time, each day blurring into the next, while somehow remaining distinct, memorable, marked by small changes that added up to something larger. I didn't see Derek much during that time. A few text messages here and there, mostly him sharing articles about emotional intelligence or sending pictures his therapist had recommended he look at. Images from our childhood that he was apparently using to reconnect with who we were before everything got complicated. I responded politely but briefly. I wasn't ready for more than that. But I heard about him, through Elena, mostly. She'd come home from work and tell me things in that careful way she had, presenting information without judgment, letting me decide what to feel about it. Derek implemented a new policy today, she said one evening in January, while we were making dinner together. Monthly one-on-ones with every member of his team. Not about performance metrics, about how they're doing, what they need, what's working and what isn't. That's good, I said, chopping garlic. It is, Elena agreed. And apparently he's been asking for feedback, real feedback, about his leadership style, about how he makes people feel. His assistant told HR that he actually apologized to her for interrupting her constantly in meetings. Said he'd been working with his therapist on active listening and realized he'd been talking over her for 3 years. I paused mid-chop. He apologized to his assistant? Shocked me too, Elena said, but apparently it was genuine. She said he teared up a little when he told her how much he valued her input and how sorry he was for not showing it before. I tried to picture Derek crying in front of his assistant, this man who'd built his entire identity on projecting strength and control and found I actually could. The Derek from Thanksgiving, rumpled and desperate and afraid, had shown me that there were cracks in the armor. Maybe those cracks were getting wider. How's his turnover? I asked. Down, Elena said. Way down. 2 people left his division this quarter, but both were planned departures, one retiring, one moving across the country for family reasons. No one's quit because of him in 3 months. That's unprecedented, actually. You sound surprised. I am, Elena admitted. She set down her knife and turned to face me. I gave him the coaching requirement because it was fair, because everyone deserves a chance to grow. But I didn't actually expect him to take it seriously. Most executives treat mandatory coaching like a box to check, show up, say the right things, go back to business as usual. But Derek seems to actually be doing the work. Does that change how you see him? Elena considered the question carefully. Professionally? Yes. He's becoming a better leader, which is good for the company. Personally, I'm reserving judgment. People can change their behavior without changing their fundamental character. I want to see if this sticks, if he's really different, or if he's just better at performing difference. That's fair, I said. Is it? Elena asked. Or am I being too cynical? You know him better than I do, Michael. Do you think he's really changing? I thought about the letter, still on my nightstand, that I read sometimes when I couldn't sleep. I thought about the text Derek sent. Never pushy, never demanding, just small updates about his life and his progress. I thought about the fact that he hadn't called, hadn't shown up at the library, hadn't tried to force connection before I was ready for it. I think he's trying, I said finally. Whether that's the same as changing? I don't know yet. In February, my mother called. I almost didn't answer. We'd spoken exactly once since Thanksgiving, a brief, stilted conversation where she'd asked why I hadn't told her about the wedding, and I'd said I didn't think she'd be interested in attending. And she'd gone very quiet and then changed the subject to the weather. But something made me pick up. Michael, she said, and her voice sounded different, smaller somehow. Do you have a minute? I have a few, I said carefully. I wanted to. She paused and I could hear her breathing, gathering courage. I wanted to apologize for Thanksgiving, for letting Derek talk to you like that, for not defending you, for all the times over the years I didn't defend you. I sat down slowly on the edge of the bed. Elena was at a late meeting, the apartment quiet around me. Just me and my mother's voice and 32 years of history between us. Mom, please let me finish, she said, and she sounded like she was crying. I've been thinking about what you said, about how Derek's accomplishments were blessings and your struggles were phases, about how I asked you when you were going to get serious about life. And you were right, Michael. I did say those things. I did make you feel like who you were wasn't enough. And I'm so sorry. Why now? I asked quietly. Why are you telling me this now? Derek came to see me, she said, a few weeks ago. He told me about his therapy, about what he's been learning about how he treated you, about how the whole family enabled it. And he asked me if I was proud of you, of your life, your work, your marriage. And I realized I'd never told you that I was, that I am. Something in my chest cracked open, something I hadn't realized I'd been holding closed. I am proud of you, and my mother continued, her words tumbling over each other now, like she was afraid if she stopped, she'd never start again. I'm proud that you found work you love, that you help people every day, that you built a life that makes you happy. I'm proud that you married someone who sees your worth. I'm proud that you're kind and thoughtful and genuine. I'm proud of the man you've become, Michael. And I'm sorry I never said it before. I'm sorry I made you feel like you had to be Derek to be enough. I couldn't speak. My throat had closed up, my eyes burning with tears I hadn't cried in years. You don't have to say anything, my mother said softly. You don't have to forgive me. I just wanted you to know that I see you now, really see you, and what I see is someone I should have celebrated all along instead of trying to change. Thank you, I managed to say. Thank you, Mom. Derek also said, she paused. He said you and Elena might be hosting Easter dinner this year? That you'd invited him and Jennifer and the kids? I blinked, confused. I haven't invited anyone to Easter dinner. Oh, my mother sounded disappointed. I thought, well, Derek seemed to think there was a plan, but maybe he was just hoping. He's been talking a lot about wanting to rebuild family connections, about doing things differently. After we hung up, I sat with the phone in my hand thinking about Derek telling my mother he hoped we'd host Easter, about him planting seeds for a future that might include all of us in the same room again, breaking bread instead of breaking each other down. When Elena came home an hour later, I told her about the call. about my mother's apology, about Derek's apparent Easter plans. Do you want to host Easter? Elena asked, sitting beside me on the couch, taking my hand. I don't know, I admitted. Part of me does. Part of me wants to believe we can be different, that we can build something new on top of all the broken things. But part of me is scared that it's too soon, that Derek's not really changed enough, that it'll just be Thanksgiving all over again. What if we made it different? Elena suggested. What if we set ground rules? No comparisons, no commentary on life choices, no performance of perfect family. Just people sharing a meal and trying to be kind to each other. You think that's possible? I think it's possible to try, Elena said. And if it doesn't work, if Derek or your parents fall back into old patterns, we can set boundaries. We can leave our own dinner if we need to. We can end the experiment and know we tried. I thought about it, about what it might feel like to gather my family in the home I shared with Elena, in this space we'd built together, on my terms instead of theirs. Okay, I said, let's try. But small, just my parents, Derek and Jennifer and the kids. And the ground rules are non-negotiable. I'll make a list, Elena said. And she was smiling now, that particular smile that meant she was strategizing, planning, figuring out how to make something impossible possible. Professional facilitator style. Everyone agrees or they don't come. Have I mentioned that I love you? You may have mentioned it once or twice, Elena said, kissing me, but I never get tired of hearing it. The text I sent to the family group chat was simple. Elena and I would like to host Easter dinner at our place. Small gathering, casual dress, no gifts. Ground rules, no commentary on anyone's life choices, career, relationship status, or parenting. We're coming together to connect, not to compare. Everyone good with that? The responses came quickly. My mother, yes. Thank you for inviting us, Michael. My father, fine. Jennifer, sounds lovely. Can we bring anything? Derek's response took longer. I watched the 3 dots appear and disappear several times before his message finally came through. Thank you for giving me another chance. I'll do better this time. I promise. Show, don't tell. I typed back. See you on Easter. March brought spring and rain and small, unexpected changes. Derek started sending me book recommendations, science fiction mostly, the kind of sprawling space operas I'd loved as a kid. He'd include little notes. Read this in high school and thought of you. Don't know why I stopped reading. Forgot how good stories could be. Or Dr. Huang suggested I find hobbies that don't involve work or performance. Trying to remember what I liked before I decided liking things was unproductive. I responded by sending him my recommendations, building a shared reading list, finding this neutral ground where we could connect without the weight of our history crushing every interaction. At work, Elena reported that Derek had started a mentorship program in his division, pairing senior employees with junior ones not for performance evaluation, but for career development and support. He's also been nominating people for promotions, she said one evening. People he'd previously overlooked. Women, minorities, people without Ivy League degrees. He told me he realized he'd been unconsciously replicating the same biases that had shaped his worldview, valuing certain markers of success over actual talent and potential. That's a pretty significant realization, I said. It is, Elena agreed. And what's more, he's acting on it. That's the difference between performing wokeness and actually doing the work of becoming less biased. He's changing systems, not just rhetoric. I thought about that, about Derek looking at the structures he'd built and seeing the flaws, seeing how he'd replicated harm without meaning to, and then actually doing something about it. You know what the weirdest part is, I said. What? I'm starting to believe him, starting to think this might actually be real. Lena squeezed my hand. People can surprise you. Sometimes they become exactly who they always had the potential to be if only they'd looked in the right direction. A week before Easter, I was at work when a woman came up to the reference desk. She was probably in her late 50s, well-dressed, with kind eyes and an uncertain smile. Excuse me, she said. Are you Michael? I am, I said. Can I help you find something? Actually, I'm Dr. Patricia Huang. I believe your brother Derek is my client. I went very still. He is. I hope you don't mind me coming by, she said quickly. This isn't about Derek. I would never violate confidentiality. But he mentioned you work here, and I wanted to see for myself. See what? She smiled. The library. Your work. Derek talks about you often in our sessions, about how you help people, about the reading programs you run, about the teenager who said a book you recommended saved her life. He speaks about you with this mixture of awe and regret. Awe at what you've built, regret that he didn't see it sooner. Why are you telling me this? I asked. Because I think you should know that Derek's transformation is genuine, Dr. Huang said. In 15 years of doing this work, I've seen a lot of executives go through coaching. Most of them treat it like a performance review, say the right things, demonstrate the right behaviors, get their certification and go back to who they were. But Derek is different. He's actually wrestling with deep questions about identity and worth and what it means to live a meaningful life. He's grieving the person he was and trying to become someone better. That's real work, Michael. Hard work. The kind that only happens when someone truly wants to change. I want to believe that, I said quietly. You don't have to believe it, but Huang said gently. You can just observe it. Watch what he does, how he treats people, how he shows up in the world. Transformation isn't a single moment. It's 1,000 small choices made over time. And from what I can see, Derek is making those choices. One day at a time, one interaction at a time, one opportunity to be better at a time. She handed me a card. If you ever want to talk, not about Derek, but about your own experience, about healing from family dysfunction. I work with adult children of complicated families. No pressure, no obligation, just an offer. After she left, I stood at the reference desk holding her card, thinking about transformation and choices and the 1,000 small steps it took to become someone new. Maybe Derek really was changing. Maybe the scared, tearful man from Thanksgiving had looked at himself and decided he didn't like what he saw. Maybe he was doing the work, real, painful, honest work, to become someone different. Or maybe this was just an elaborate performance, a long game to restore his reputation and salvage his career. Only time would tell. Only actions, repeated over months and years, would reveal the truth. But I was starting to hope, and hope, fragile as it was, felt like progress. The morning of Easter, I woke to Elena tracing patterns on my back with her fingertips, her body warm against mine, the early light filtering through the curtains in shades of gold and pink. Nervous? She asked softly. Terrified, I admitted. We can cancel, she said. Right now. I'll send a text, say we're sick, postpone until you're ready. I rolled over to face her, studying the familiar landscape of her face, the small scar above her left eyebrow from a childhood fall, the constellation of freckles across her nose that only appeared in summer, the eyes that saw through every defense I'd ever built and loved me anyway. No, I said, we're doing this. I'm ready. Or at least, I'm as ready as I'm going to be. Okay, she kissed me gently. But the moment it gets toxic, the moment anyone violates the ground rules, we're pulling the plug. This is our home, Michael, our space. We don't have to tolerate disrespect here. Deal, I said. We got up and spent the morning preparing. Elena had hired caterers. I can cook, she'd said, but I'd rather focus on managing family dynamics than managing a turkey. And they delivered everything yesterday. Our job was just to set the table, arrange flowers, create an environment that felt welcoming without being performative. I set out the good dishes, wedding gifts from Elena's friends, simple white porcelain that somehow managed to be both elegant and unpretentious. Elena arranged tulips in a vase, their bright colors cheerful against the white tablecloth. We worked in comfortable silence, moving around each other with the easy choreography of people who'd learned each other's rhythms. At one point, Elena stopped what she was doing and just looked at me. What? I asked. I'm just thinking about how different your life might have been if you'd never walked into that coffee shop, she said. If I'd never spilled my coffee, if we'd never started talking. You'd still be you, kind and genuine and doing work that matters. But you'd probably still be going to these family gatherings alone, still absorbing their comments, still believing on some level that you weren't enough. And you'd be, I prompted. Successful, Elena said. powerful, lonely, surrounded by people who wanted something from me but never seeing me, never having someone who loved me for who I was instead of what I could provide. She crossed the room and wrapped her arms around me. We saved each other, I think. You gave me a reason to be soft. I gave you permission to be proud. Best coffee spill of my life, I said, and she laughed against my chest. The door bustle rang at 2 p.m. exactly. My parents, of course, my father's obsession with punctuality was one of the few reliable things about him. I opened the door to find them standing awkwardly in the hallway, my mother holding a pie despite my no gifts rule, my father in a suit despite my casual dress specification. Hi, I said. Michael, my mother said, and then she was hugging me, this tight, desperate embrace that felt like an apology and a plea and a promise all at once. Thank you for inviting us. Your home is beautiful. Come in, I said, stepping back to let them enter. They walked in slowly, taking in the space, the floor-to-ceiling windows, the expensive furniture, the art on the walls, the view of the city spreading out beneath us like a map of possibilities. Jesus, my father muttered. This is a lot, my mother finished. This is a lot, Michael. Elena appeared from the kitchen, graceful in a simple blue dress, her hair down, her smile warm but guarded. Mr. and Mrs. Matthews, she said, extending her hand. I'm Elena. It's nice to finally meet you properly. My mother shook her hand, then pulled Elena into a hug that clearly surprised both of them. Thank you, my mother said, pulling back. Thank you for seeing him, for loving him, for making him happy. He makes it easy, Elena said, and the genuine affection in her voice made something in my chest ache. My father shook Elena's hand with the stiff formality he brought to all social interactions. Impressive place, he said. Must cost a fortune. Dad, I said warningly. What? I'm just making an observation. The ground rules, I started. No commentary on life choices, my father finished. I remember, I'm not commenting on your life. I'm commenting on the real estate. It's okay, Michael, Elena said smoothly. Yes, Mr. Matthews, it cost a fortune. I bought it years ago when the market was different. Good investment. She smiled, diffusing the tension with practiced ease. Can I get you both something to drink? We have wine, beer, sparkling water. As she led my parents to the living room, I exhaled slowly, reminding myself that this was just the beginning, that we had hours to go, that I needed to pace myself. The doorbell rang again, Derek and Jennifer and the kids. I opened the door to find Derek holding a bottle of wine and looking like he might vomit from nerves. Jennifer stood beside him with a smile that seemed genuine, and their kids, Emma and Jackson, I reminded myself, their names were Emma and Jackson, bounced excitedly on their toes. Uncle Michael, Emma said, launching herself at me for a hug. She was 7, all energy and enthusiasm. Dad says you have a library in your house. Can we see it? I have books, I said, amused. I don't know if that counts as a library. Any room with books is a library, Jackson said seriously. He was 10 and had apparently inherited his father's tendency toward pronouncements. That's what my teacher says. Your teacher is wise, I said. Come in. I'll show you where the books are after we eat. Derek stepped inside, and for a moment we just looked at each other. He looked better than he had at Thanksgiving, less rumpled, less desperate, but there was still something tentative about him, like he wasn't sure he was allowed to be here. Thank you, he said quietly. For this, for another chance. The rules apply to everyone, I said, not unkindly. No comparisons, no commentary, no performance. Just family trying to be decent to each other. I can do that, Derek said. I will do that. Jennifer hugged me, whispering, he really has changed, Michael. I know you have reasons to doubt, but he's not the same person he was 6 months ago. I wanted to believe her. God, I wanted to believe her. We gathered in the dining room, this strange collection of people who shared Danish and history and wounds. Elena sat at one end of the table, me at the other, my parents on one side, Derek's family on the other. The caterers had done an incredible job, ham and turkey, and all the traditional sides, plus some additions Elena had requested to make it feel less performative, more genuine. There was hummus and pita because Elena loved it, mac and cheese because the kids would actually eat it, A salad with pears and candied walnuts, because I'd mentioned once that it reminded me of a restaurant we'd gone to on our honeymoon. For a while, everyone was quiet, just eating, the silence awkward, but not hostile. Then Emma said, "Aunt Elena, what do you do for work?" The title Aunt Elena clearly surprised her, but she recovered quickly. "I run a technology company," she said. "We make software that helps other businesses work better." "That sounds boring," Emma said with the brutal honesty of children. "Emma," Jennifer said, mortified. But Elena laughed. "It can be boring sometimes," she admitted, "but it can also be exciting. We're working on a project right now that helps doctors diagnose diseases faster, which means people get treatment sooner and have better chances of getting well. That part's pretty cool." "Do you make a lot of money?" Jackson asked. "Jackson," Derek said, his face going red. "It's okay," Elena said. "Yes, I make a lot of money, more than most people. Way more than most people. But money isn't why I do the work. I do it because I like solving problems and building things and helping people." "Uncle Michael doesn't make a lot of money," Emma said thoughtfully. "Dad said he works at a library." The table went very still. This was it, the moment where someone would make a comparison, would say something about success or worth, or how different their lives were. Derek looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. But then he said, his voice steady, "Uncle Michael helps people find books that can change their lives. He teaches kids how to read. He makes the library a safe place for people who need one. That's more important than making money." Everyone stared at him. "What?" Derek said, looking around. "It's true. I've been thinking a lot about what actually matters, and Uncle Michael's work matters more than mine does. I optimize profits. He changes lives. There's no comparison." He paused, then smiled slightly. "And I mean that in the best way. Not as commentary on anyone's choices, but as genuine respect for what he does." My mother was crying quietly into her napkin. My father was staring at his plate like it held the secrets of the universe. Jennifer was squeezing Derek's hand under the table, and I was sitting there completely stunned because that had been genuine. Not performative, not calculated, not designed to earn points, just honest appreciation, spoken naturally without prompting. "Thank you," I said quietly. "That means a lot." "I should have said it years ago," Derek said. "I'm saying it now." Emma, oblivious to the emotional weight of the moment, asked, "Can I have more mac and cheese?" And just like that, the tension broke. We all laughed, and Elena spooned more mac and cheese onto Emma's plate, and conversations started flowing more naturally. My mother asked about the wedding, and Elena told her about the beach ceremony, about our friends who'd attended, about how we'd written our own vows and both cried through them. My father asked about the company, and Elena gave him a simplified explanation of what they did, answering his questions with patience and detail. Jennifer asked about the apartment, and I told her about moving in, about how terrified I'd been that I wouldn't fit into Elena's world, about how Elena had made space for me, not by changing herself, but by letting me see all the parts of her that didn't fit the CEO image. Derek asked about the library, and I found myself telling stories about the teenager who'd emailed me, about the elderly man who came in every day to read the newspaper because his wife had died and the silence at home was unbearable, about the child who'd been struggling with reading until we found the right book and suddenly everything clicked. And Derek listened like it mattered, like my work mattered, like I mattered. "I want to show you something," Derek said after dinner, while Elena and Jennifer were in the kitchen with the kids, while my parents sat in the living room with coffee. He pulled out his phone and opened a folder of photos. "This is my team," he said, showing me a picture of about 20 people at what looked like a celebration. "We hit our quarterly targets last month, and instead of just sending an email, I took everyone out to dinner. Not a fancy corporate thing, a pizza place they all liked. And I went around the table and told each person specifically what they'd contributed, what I valued about their work, how they'd made a difference." He scrolled to another photo. "This is Melissa. She's been my assistant for 3 years. I never knew she had a daughter until last month because I'd never asked about her life. Now I know her daughter's name is Sophie, that she's 5, that she loves dinosaurs. Melissa brings Sophie's drawings to show me sometimes, and I put them on my office wall." Another photo. "This is James. He's been working under me for 2 years. Brilliant analyst, always has great ideas. I never listened to them before because he didn't go to an Ivy League school, and I had this unconscious bias that meant I valued pedigree over insight. I promoted him last month. He cried in my office, told me it was the first time he'd felt seen at this company. He put the phone down and looked at me. "I'm not telling you this to prove I've changed," he said. "I'm telling you because I want you to know that what you said to me about how I made people feel, about the kind of leader I was being, it woke something up in me, made me look at myself and hate what I saw. And I decided I didn't want to be that person anymore." "What kind of person do you want to be, Kyle?" I asked. Derek thought about it. "Someone like you," he said finally. "Someone who sees people, who values kindness over achievement, connection over competition, meaning over metrics. Someone who makes people feel like they matter just because they exist, not because of what they can do or provide." "Derek, I know I fucked up," he said. "I know I spent 32 years being terrible to you, making you feel small, missing who you actually were because I was too obsessed with who I thought you should be. And I know that saying sorry doesn't fix that. But I want you to know that I'm trying. Every day, in every interaction, I'm trying to be the brother I should have been all along." I didn't know what to say. There were no words big enough to hold what I was feeling. This strange mixture of grief and hope, of anger at the past and tentative optimism about the future. So I just said, "Keep trying. That's all I can ask. Just keep trying." "I will," Derek promised. "For the rest of my life, if that's what it takes." Later, after everyone had left, after the dishes were done and the apartment was quiet again, Elena and I stood by the window looking out over the city. "How do you feel?" she asked. "I don't know," I admitted, "like something shifted maybe, like we took a step towards something that might eventually look like a real family." "Your mother really does see you now," Elena observed. "I could tell. The way she looked at you during dinner, that was pride." "Real pride, Duan." "Yeah," I said. "That was unexpected. Good, but unexpected." "And Derek?" "Derek is trying," I said. "Really trying. And for now, that's enough." Elena wrapped her arms around me from behind, resting her chin on my shoulder. "You know what I love about you?" she said. "What?" "You're brave enough to hope, even after everything, even knowing how badly hope can hurt when it's disappointed. You're still willing to give people chances, to believe they can be better. That's extraordinary, Michael." "Or stupid," I said. "No," Elena said firmly. "It's grace. It's the kind of grace that changes the world. One person at a time, one chance at a time." We stood like that for a long time, wrapped up in each other, the city lights twinkling below us like stars that had forgotten they were supposed to be in the sky. And I thought about Derek's photos, about my mother's pride, about my father's stiff but genuine interest in Elena's work. I thought about Emma calling Elena Aunt Elena, and Jackson asking earnest questions about what mattered. I thought about how families were broken and rebuilt, over and over, each time with the possibility of becoming something different and something better. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't fixed. There would be our setbacks and struggles and moments when the old patterns tried to reassert themselves. But it was progress. Real, genuine, measurable progress. And for now, that was enough. Summer arrived in waves of heat and humidity that made the city feel like it was breathing, alive and restless. Elena and I fell into new rhythms. Morning runs along the river before the sun got too high. Evenings on the balcony with cold wine and good books. Weekends spent exploring neighborhoods we'd never visited, finding small treasures in corner bookstores and hole-in-the-wall restaurants. Derek texted regularly now, not constantly, but consistently. Pictures of books he was reading, questions about recommendations, updates about work and therapy. It felt almost normal, like we were becoming the brothers we might have been if we had started differently, if the comparisons and competition had never taken root. Then, in early July, everything shifted. I was at work, helping a patron track down an obscure reference book, when my phone buzzed with a call from Jennifer. I almost didn't answer. We'd exchanged pleasantries at Easter, but weren't close. But something made me excuse myself and step into the back office. "Jennifer, is everything okay?" "It's Derek," she said, and her voice was shaking. "He's in the hospital. Heart attack. They're doing surgery right now. I thought you should know. The world tilted sideways. What? When? Is he? This morning, he was at work, started having chest pains, collapsed in his office. Someone called 911. They got him here fast. The doctors say that's good. But Michael, I'm scared. I'm so scared. Which hospital? She told me. I told her I was on my way. I called Elena as I rushed out of the library, barely remembering to tell Sarah I was leaving. She answered on the first ring. Derek's in the hospital, I said without preamble. Heart attack, surgery, I'm heading there now. I'll meet you there, Elena said immediately. 20 minutes. The hospital was one of those modern medical complexes that tried to hide its essential nature behind art installations and soothing color palettes. I found Jennifer in a waiting room on the cardiac floor, her eyes red, her hands twisted together in her lap. My mother was with her, looking smaller than I'd ever seen her, aged a decade in a few hours. My father stood by the window, his back rigid, his silence heavier than words. Any news? I asked, sitting beside Jennifer. They're still operating, she said. It was a major blockage. They're doing bypass surgery. The doctor said he's young for this, that it's unusual, but stress and genetics and... She trailed off, wiping her eyes. I keep thinking about how hard he's been working, how much pressure he puts on himself, and I wonder if this is my fault. If I should have seen it coming, should have made him slow down. This isn't your fault, I said firmly. Isn't it? She looked at me, her eyes desperate. You know what he's been doing these past few months, Michael? The therapy, the reading, the complete reconstruction of how he thinks and operates in the world. It's exhausting work. And on top of that, he's still got the same pressure to perform, the same impossible standards he holds himself to. Maybe the combination was too much. Maybe trying to change while maintaining everything else broke something. My mother made a sound somewhere between a saw and a tampa. This is my fault, she said. I raised him to think his worth came from achievement. I made him believe he had to be perfect. I created this. Mom, no. Yes, she said, looking at me with tear-stained certainty. I did to Derek what Derek did to you. I compared him to other kids, pushed him to be the best, made him feel like anything less than exceptional was failure. I created a son who couldn't rest, couldn't be satisfied, couldn't just exist without performing, and now his heart is literally breaking from the strain. I didn't know what to say to that. There was truth in it, uncomfortable and painful truth about cycles of harm and how we replicate our wounds in the people we love. Elena arrived still in her work clothes, slightly breathless from rushing. She hugged Jennifer, greeted my parents with quiet courtesy, and then came to sit beside me, taking my hand. How are you doing? She asked softly. I don't know, I admitted. I'm worried about Derek, obviously. But I'm also thinking about how fragile all of this is, how he was just starting to change, just starting to become someone different. And now you're afraid he won't get the chance to finish, Elena said. Yeah. We sat in silence for a while. My father paced, my mother prayed quietly. Jennifer scrolled through her phone, looking at pictures of Derek with the kids, her face crumpling every time she landed on one that made her smile. Time moved strangely in hospital waiting rooms. Minutes stretched into hours, hours compressed into moments. The light changed outside the windows, afternoon bleeding into evening. Finally, a surgeon came out, still in scrubs, looking tired but not devastated. Mrs. Matthews, she said, and Jennifer stood so quickly she nearly knocked over her chair. Is he? He's alive, the surgeon said. The surgery went well. We did a triple bypass, 3 major blockages, which at his age is concerning, but not unprecedented. He's in recovery now. He'll need significant lifestyle changes, rehabilitation, probably medication for the rest of his life. But barring complications, he should make a full recovery. Jennifer collapsed back into her chair, sobbing with relief. My mother pressed her hands to her mouth. My father's shoulders sagged like someone had cut the strings holding him upright. Can we see him? Jennifer asked. Not yet. He's still sedated. But in a few hours, once he's moved to a room, family can visit briefly. 2 at a time, 5 minutes maximum. After the surgeon left, we all exhaled collectively, the tension that had held us rigid for hours finally releasing. He's okay, Jennifer kept saying. He's okay. He's going to be okay. But I couldn't shake the feeling that nothing was okay, that this was a warning we couldn't ignore, that Derek had pushed himself so hard trying to become better that he'd nearly destroyed himself in the process. They moved Derek to a room around 9 p.m. Jennifer went in first with Emma and Jackson, then my parents. When it was my turn, Elena squeezed my hand. "You want me to come with you?" she asked. "No," I said. "I think I need to do this alone." Derek looked small in the hospital bed, diminished by tubes and monitors in the thin hospital gown. His skin was pale, his face drawn, but he was awake, his eyes finding mine when I walked in. "Hey," he said, his voice rough. "Hey yourself." I sat in the chair beside his bed. "You scared the shit out of everyone." "Sorry." He tried to smile. Apparently my body decided it had had enough of my bullshit. "The doctor said you need lifestyle changes." "The doctor said a lot of things," Derek said. "Less stress, better diet, exercise, work-life balance. All the things I've been terrible at my entire life." He closed his eyes. "I've been thinking, lying here about how hard I've been pushing myself, trying to be a better leader, a better brother, a better person while still maintaining the same impossible standards at work. Like I could transform who I was without changing what I did. Turns out that doesn't work." "Derek, let me finish," he said, opening his eyes. "Please, I need to say this while I have the clarity of almost dying." I nodded. "I've been doing everything the therapist suggested," Derek continued. "Reading the books, doing the exercises, changing my behavior. But I've been treating it like a project, like another thing to optimize and perfect. I've been trying to become a better person with the same mindset that had made me a shitty person in the first place. The same relentless drive, the same perfectionism, the same belief that I have to be the best at everything, including personal growth." He laughed, bitter and tired. "Do you know what I thought when I started having chest pains this morning? Not I should call 911, not I might be dying. I thought, I can't let this interrupt my meeting. I have a presentation to give. That's how fucked up my priorities are, Michael. I almost died because I didn't want to inconvenience people at work." "You're scared," I said quietly. "That's understandable." "I'm terrified," Derek admitted, "because I'm realizing that changing my behavior isn't enough. I have to change my whole life. The expectations, the way I measure my worth. And I don't know if I can do that. I don't know who I am without achievement and performance and the constant drive to be better than everyone else." I thought about that, about Derek facing the same question I'd faced years ago, the same fundamental uncertainty about identity and worth and what made a life meaningful. "Can I tell you something?" I said. "Yeah. When I first started working at the library, I felt like a failure. I'd see your posts on social media about promotions and bonuses and business trips, and I'd think about how I was shelving books for minimum wage and going home to a studio apartment with water-stained ceilings. And I thought there was something wrong with me because I didn't want what you had. Because I was happy with less." Derek was listening intently, his monitors beeping steadily in the background. "It took me a long time to understand that happiness isn't about having what someone else has," I continued. "It's about knowing what you actually want and building a life around that instead of around what you think you're supposed to want. You don't have to be the best at everything, Derek. You don't even have to be good at everything. You just have to figure out what matters to you, really matters, in your bones, in your heart, and let go of everything else." "What if I don't know what matters?" Derek asked, his voice small. "What if I've spent so long performing that I don't know what's real anymore?" "Then you figure it out," I said. "One day at a time, one choice at a time, and maybe you make some mistakes and have to adjust. But at least you're building something authentic instead of just maintaining a performance." Derek was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "I think I need to quit." "Quit therapy?" "Quit my job." He looked at me, and I saw something like relief in his eyes. "I've been thinking about it for weeks, but couldn't admit it. Because what's a VP without a company? What's Derek Matthews if he's not successful by conventional metrics? But lying here, realizing I almost died for a job that's literally killing me, I think I know the answer. He's just Derek. Just a guy trying to figure out what makes life worth living. Elena will understand, I said. She values people over positions. I know. That's part of why it's terrifying. If I quit, I can't blame her if my life falls apart. I can't say she fired me or didn't give me a chance. I have to own the decision and whatever comes after. What do you think comes after? Derek smiled, and for the first time since I'd walked in, it reached his eyes. I have no fucking idea. And maybe that's the point. Maybe not knowing, not having a plan, not optimizing every variable, maybe that's how you actually live instead of just performing life. A nurse came in, checking monitors, adjusting tubes, giving me a look that said my 5 minutes were up. I should go, I said, standing. Michael, Derek said as I reached the door. Yeah? Thank you for coming, for not saying I told you so, for treating me like I'm worth caring about even after everything. You're my brother, I said simply. That doesn't change just because things were hard for a while. I left him there, small and pale in his hospital bed, facing the biggest transformation of his life, not the one his therapist had prescribed, but the one his nearly dying heart had demanded. In the waiting room, Elena stood up when she saw me. How is he? Alive, scared, talking about quitting his job. Elena's eyebrows rose. Is he serious? I think so. He said the job is killing him, that he can't change who he is while staying in an environment that rewards who he was. He's not wrong, Elena said thoughtfully. I've seen it before. People trying to transform while maintaining the same circumstances that shaped them. It rarely works. The environment keeps pulling them back into old patterns. Are you okay with it, if he quits? Elena smiled. Michael, I've been watching Derek for months, watching him try to become a better leader while hating himself for not being better faster. If quitting is what he needs to save his life and his soul, then I support it completely. I'd rather have a healthy ex-employee than a dead VP. We gathered the family, shared that Derek was stable, that he'd recover. Jennifer decided to stay the night at the hospital. My parents went home, looking older and more uncertain than I'd ever seen them. Elena and I took a taxi back to our apartment, the city sliding past the windows in streams of light and shadow. Do you think he'll actually do it? Elena asked as we rode the elevator up. Quit? I think almost dying changed something, I said. Gave him permission to want something different. Whether he follows through, I guess we'll see. That night, lying in bed with Elena's breathing slow and steady beside me, I thought about Derek in his hospital bed, facing the vast uncertainty of a life built on new foundations. I thought about how terrifying it must be to let go of everything you'd worked for, everything you'd believed about yourself, and step into the unknown. But I also thought about how necessary it was, how transformation required destruction first, the willingness to tear down what wasn't working and build something new from the rubble. Derek had almost died trying to be two people at once, the old Derek and the new one, the high-achieving VP and the emotionally intelligent human being. Maybe nearly dying would give him the courage to choose. Maybe he'd finally understand what I'd learned years ago, that you didn't have to be extraordinary to be enough. You just had to be real. Derek came home from the hospital after 5 days, pale and weak and under strict orders to rest. Jennifer set up the guest room downstairs so he wouldn't have to climb stairs. The kids drew pictures to decorate the walls, hearts and flowers and stick figures labeled Dad, who all looked like they were smiling. I visited twice that first week, bringing books Derek had mentioned wanting to read, sitting with him while he recovered, watching him struggle with the enforced stillness of convalescence. I'm terrible at this, he said on my second visit, gesturing at himself in bed, at the medications lined up on the nightstand, at the heart monitor the home health nurse had installed to track his recovery, at being helpless, at needing people, at not being productive. You're recovering from major surgery, I said. You're allowed to be helpless. I keep thinking about work, Derek admitted. About all the things that aren't getting done, all the meetings I'm missing, all the ways I'm failing by not being there. Derek, you had a heart attack. No one expects you to be working. I expect it, he said. That's the problem. My brain knows I need to rest, but my whole identity is screaming that I'm worthless if I'm not producing, not achieving, not being exceptional. I thought about that, about how deeply the performance was embedded, how it had become indistinguishable from his sense of self. What did your therapist say? I asked. Dr. Huang says this is an opportunity, Derek said, to practice being instead of doing, to learn to measure my worth in something other than output, to sit with the discomfort of not being productive and discover that I still exist on the other side of it. That sounds terrifying. It is, Derek agreed. It's the most terrifying thing I've ever done, actually. Lying here, being useless, feeling like I'm disappearing because I'm not producing anything. But also, he paused, seeming to struggle for words. Also kind of liberating. Like if I can still be a person, still be Derek, even when I'm not achieving anything, then maybe achievement isn't actually what makes me real. Over the next few weeks, I watched Derek grapple with that realization. Jennifer told me about the small changes, how he'd started asking Emma about her day instead of absently nodding while checking his phone, how he'd sat with Jackson for an hour, helping with a science project, not fixing it or optimizing it, but just being present for the process. He's learning how to be a dad, Jennifer said one afternoon when I'd stopped by with groceries. Not the dad who provides and achieves and makes sure everyone knows he's successful, but the dad who's just there, present, paying attention. It's strange and beautiful, and I keep waiting for him to snap back into old patterns, but he hasn't yet. Yet, I echoed. I know, Jennifer said. I'm not naive. This is hard work, and recovery isn't linear. There will be setbacks, but Michael, I'm seeing glimpses of the man I married before ambition ate him alive. The man who laughed and played and found joy in small things. I'd forgotten he used to be like that. What was he like, Alt, I asked, before saying you? Jennifer smiled, distant with memory. Kind, genuinely kind, not performatively. He volunteered at a soup kitchen in college. He cried at weddings. He wrote poetry, terrible poetry, but he wrote it because he loved language and images and trying to capture feelings in words. He wanted to be a teacher. Did you know that? Before business school, before the corporate track, he wanted to teach literature to high school kids. I didn't know that, I said quietly. Neither did he, apparently, Jennifer said, until last week when I found one of his old notebooks from college and showed him. He read his own poems and started crying, said he didn't recognize the person who wrote them, said he'd buried that version of himself so deep he'd forgotten it existed. That conversation stayed with me. I'd never known Derek wanted to be a teacher. I'd never known he wrote poetry. I'd only ever known the polished, achieving, relentlessly successful version, the one who'd been built to impress, to compete, to win. But apparently there had been another Derek once, someone softer, more creative, more connected to his heart than his ambitions. And maybe, I thought, recovery wasn't about becoming someone new. Maybe it was about rediscovering who you'd been before the performance began. 6 weeks after the heart attack, Derek called me. I did it, he said without preamble. Did what? Quit. Gave Elena my resignation this morning, effective in 2 weeks. I sat down slowly on the edge of my desk at the library. How do you feel? Terrified, Derek said. And then he laughed. Absolutely terrified, but also lighter, like I'd been carrying this massive weight and I finally set it down. Elena was incredible, by the way. Told me she respected my decision, that she'd known it was coming, that she'd write me a glowing recommendation whenever I was ready for what came next. What does come next? I have no fucking idea, Derek said, and he sounded almost giddy with the uncertainty. I have savings. I have time. I have a second chance at life and no plan for what to do with it. It's the most freedom I've had since I was 18 and decided to pursue business because it seemed like the smart, responsible, successful thing to do. Have you told Mom and Dad? Yeah, this morning. Dad said I was making a mistake, that I was throwing away everything I'd worked for, that I'd regret it. Mom cried, but then she said something that surprised me. She said, I almost lost you. If quitting your job means I get to keep you, then quit. That must have felt good to hear. It did, Derek admitted, but also strange. Like, where was that perspective before? When I was killing myself trying to live up to expectations, where was the your life matters more than your achievements energy? People change when they're scared, I said. Almost losing you woke her up. Maybe, Derek said. Or maybe she's just saying what she thinks I need to hear. I don't know. I'm trying not to overthink it, which is new for me, not overthinking things. We talked for a while longer about his plans for the next few weeks, mostly rest and spending time with the kids, about his therapy, now down to once a week but with a new focus on identity reconstruction, about the strange sensation of not having anywhere to be or anything to prove. Can I ask you something? Derek said before we hung up. Sure. How did you do it? Build a life around meaning instead of achievement? Find satisfaction in helping people instead of climbing ladders? How did you learn to be enough just as you were? I thought about it, about the years of feeling inadequate, about finding Elena, about slowly understanding that the metrics I'd been judged by didn't actually measure anything real. I don't think I learned it, I said honestly. I think I just stopped fighting it, stopped trying to convince myself I wanted something different, stopped performing the life I thought I should want, and started living the one I actually did. The satisfaction came after, from finally aligning who I was with how I lived. That makes sense, Derek said quietly. I think I've been performing my whole life. I don't even know who I am when I'm not achieving. Then maybe that's what you do next, I suggested. Figure out who Derek is when he's not a VP or a high achiever or the golden child. Just Derek, a guy with interests and values and a heart that nearly stopped to teach him what matters. Just Derek, he repeated, like he was trying on the identity for size. I like the sound of that. Derek's last day at the company was a Friday in early September. Elena came home that evening with stories of his exit, how he'd spent the day having one-on-ones with his team, thanking them personally, apologizing for ways he'd failed them, promising to be better in whatever he did next. He cried during his goodbye speech, Elena said, pouring us both wine. Actually cried. Told everyone that the job had been killing him slowly and that they shouldn't make the same mistake he had, sacrificing their health and happiness for corporate success. It was the most honest thing I've ever heard an executive say. How did people react? Standing ovation, Elena said, and about half of them were crying too. Turns out Derek had become genuinely beloved over the past few months. People saw him changing, saw him becoming more human, and it gave them permission to be more human too. His replacement is going to have a tough time filling those shoes, not because Derek was the most productive or successful, but because he'd become the most real. I felt a strange swell of pride for my brother. This man who'd spent months doing painful work to become someone different, someone better, and had succeeded in ways that couldn't be measured in quarterly reports or performance reviews. What's he going to do now? Elena asked. I don't think he knows yet. He's giving himself time to figure it out. Good, Elena said. Everyone should have that chance to stop and breathe and discover what they actually want instead of just pursuing what they think they should want. That weekend, Derek invited us over for dinner. Nothing fancy. He'd made spaghetti and meatballs, the kids had helped with garlic bread, and the table was set with mismatched plates and paper napkins instead of the formal place settings I remembered from past visits. Welcome to our extremely casual Friday night, Derek said, greeting us at the door in jeans and an old t-shirt, looking more relaxed than I'd ever seen him. Fair warning, the food is mediocre and the company is chaotic, but we're having fun, which is apparently what matters now. Emma and Jackson were bouncing around showing Elena drawings they'd made, talking over each other in their enthusiasm. Jennifer was in the kitchen finishing the salad, her hair up in a messy bun, her face free of the perfect makeup she usually wore to family gatherings. We ate at their kitchen table instead of the formal dining room. The conversation was loud and overlapping, full of the kids' stories about school and friends and small dramas that seemed enormous to them. Derek listened to all of it, asking questions, laughing at their jokes, fully present in a way I'd never witnessed before. After dinner, while Elena and Jennifer cleaned up despite our protests, Derek and I ended up in the backyard. It was early evening, the air still warm, cicadas singing their late summer song. I've been thinking about what comes next, Derek said, sitting on the porch steps, looking out over the small lawn where the kids were playing. And I think I want to teach, he said. Not college, not business school, high school, literature or writing or something that lets me help kids figure out who they are instead of just what they can achieve. I stared at him. Jennifer told me you wanted to be a teacher once, before business school. I did, Derek said. I'd forgotten, but it's like, once I remembered, I couldn't stop thinking about it. About reading books with teenagers, about helping them see that stories matter, that art and beauty and meaning exist outside of metrics and productivity. About being the kind of teacher who sees them as whole people, not just test scores or college applications. That's a big change from VP at a tech company. I know. I'd have to get certified, probably go back to school for education courses. It would mean a massive pay cut, way less prestige. None of the things I spent my adult life pursuing. But Michael, he looked at me, and his eyes were bright with something I'd never seen in them before. I think I'd be happy. Actually happy, not just successful. I think I'd go to bed at night feeling like I'd done something meaningful instead of just productive. Then you should do it, I said simply. You make it sound easy. It's not easy, I said, but it's simple. You know what you want. You know what would make you happy. Everything else is just logistics. Derek laughed. Just logistics, says the man who married a billionaire and lives in a penthouse. I married Elena when she was crashing on my couch because she'd just gotten dumped, I said, before any of this. And I would have married her if she'd stayed a broke entrepreneur working out of coffee shops. Because what I wanted was her, not her success. How did you get so wise, Derek asked. I'm not wise, I'm just clear about what matters to me. There's a difference. We sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching Emma and Jackson chase fireflies, their laughter bright in the gathering darkness. I'm sorry, Derek said suddenly. For what? For all of it. For 32 years of being a shitty brother, for making you feel less than, for not seeing what was right in front of me, that you'd figured out what I'm just now learning. That success is bullshit if it makes you miserable. You've already apologized, I said. I know, but I keep finding new layers of it, new ways I was wrong. Like, I'm realizing now that all those comparisons, all that commentary about your life choices, I was trying to convince myself as much as you. Trying to believe that my path was the right one, the only one, because if yours was valid too, then maybe I'd chosen wrong. Maybe I'd sacrificed happiness for achievement and gotten a raw deal. And now? Now I know, no, I got a raw deal, Derek said. But I also know it's not too late to renegotiate. I'm 44. If I'm lucky, I've got another 40 years. That's enough time to build a completely different life. A better one that's actually mine. I'm proud of you, I said, and I meant it. Derek's eyes filled with tears. You are? Yeah, it takes courage to admit you were wrong about everything. It takes even more courage to start over. You're doing both. Thank you, Derek said, for not giving up on me, for giving me chances even when I didn't deserve them, for showing me what a life built on authenticity looks like. You did the work, I said. I just existed, lived my life. You're the one who looked at it and saw something worth learning from. Emma ran up to us, breathless and glowing, a firefly cupped carefully in her hands. Look, I caught one. Dad, can we keep it? We can look at it for a minute, Derek said gently, and then we have to let it go. It needs to be free to do its firefly things. But I want to keep it, Emma protested. I know, Derek said, but wanting something and it being good for that thing are different. Sometimes loving something means letting it be what it needs to be, even if that's not what we want it to be. He looked at me when he said it, and I understood we weren't just talking about fireflies anymore. Emma reluctantly opened her hands, and we watched the firefly drift up into the darkening sky, its light blinking on and off, a small, bright pulse of existence in the vast, uncertain night. Autumn came in bursts of color and crisp air that made the city feel renewed, like it was shaking off summer's lethargy and remembering how to move with purpose. Elena and I celebrated our first anniversary with a weekend at the beach where we'd gotten married. Walking the same sand, watching the same sunset, marveling at how much had changed and how much had stayed exactly the same. A year ago, you were just Michael, Elena said, her hand in mine as we walked along the water's edge. My Michael, the man I loved. And now you're also the man who reconciled with his family, who helped his brother transform, who stood up at Thanksgiving and changed everything. I'm still just Michael, I said. I know, Elena said, smiling. That's what I love most. All of this, the drama, the transformation, Derek's heart attack and career change, you went through it without losing yourself. You stayed exactly who you were. Kind, genuine, certain of your worth. That's rare, Michael. Most people would have used the leverage, would have made Derek grovel more, would have become bitter or vengeful. But you just stayed you. I had good examples, I said, pulling her close. You showed me what it looked like to be powerful without being cruel, fair without being weak. That's not something I could have learned alone. We taught each other, Elena said. You taught me softness. I taught you strength. Together we're something neither of us could have been separately. We made love that night in the same hotel room where we'd spent our wedding night, and it felt like a renewal, a promise remade, a choice to continue choosing each other through whatever came next. Back in the city, Derek was deep into his teaching certification program. He'd enrolled in an accelerated track at a local university, taking night classes while spending his days volunteering at a public high school in a neighborhood the city had long since written off as underserved, which was code for underfunded, overlooked, filled with kids who'd been told they didn't matter. He called me one evening in late October, his voice electric with excitement. I ran my first full class today, he said, 10th grade English. We read The Road Not Taken and discussed it. And Michael, these kids are brilliant. They saw things in that poem I'd never considered. They made connections to their own lives that were so insightful and raw and real. One kid, Marcus, he usually sits in the back and doesn't talk. He said the poem wasn't about choosing the road less traveled, but about looking back and justifying our choices by pretending they were inevitable. That's graduate level analysis. And he just saw it in the text on his own. You sound happy, I said, smiling at his enthusiasm. I'm not just happy, Derek said. I'm alive, like actually alive, not just performing life. I go home exhausted but fulfilled. I think about my students at night, what they need, how to reach them, what books might speak to where they are in their lives. It's nothing like the corporate strategy sessions I used to obsess over. This matters, Michael. These kids matter. I told you you'd be good at this. You believed in me before I believed in myself, Derek said. That means more than you know. He started sending me text messages throughout the day, pictures of classroom discussions, quotes from student essays, stories about small victories and heartbreaking setbacks. I watched him fall in love with teaching the way people fall in love with other people. Completely, messily, with full commitment to the beautiful struggle of it. One evening in November, Derek showed up at the library just before closing. I was shelving returns in the literature section when I saw him browsing the stacks, running his fingers along book spines like they were precious artifacts. Hey, I said, what are you doing here? I need your help, Derek said. I'm trying to build a class library for my students. Books they'd actually want to read, not just curriculum requirements. Books about kids like them, facing problems like theirs. Books that show them they were not alone, that their stories matter, that reading can be a lifeline when everything else is falling apart. That's a good instinct, I said. What do you have so far? Nothing, that's why I'm here. I figured if anyone would know how to build a library that changes lives, it's you. We spent the next 2 hours going through the stacks together, Derek taking notes while I pulled books and explained why they mattered. The Hate You Give for discussions about justice and identity. The Outsiders because it was timeless and honest about class and belonging. Speak for kids dealing with trauma who needed to see survival as possible. These are expensive, Derek said, looking at the list we'd compiled. Like a couple $1,000s worth of books. Yeah, I said. School budgets being what they are, most teachers end up paying out of pocket. I'll buy them, Derek said immediately. All of them. I've got the savings. This is what money should be for, giving kids access to stories that might save them. That's generous. It's not generous, Derek said. It's necessary. These kids have so little, Michael. They show up every day to a building that's falling apart with textbooks from the 90s, with teachers who are so burned out, they're just going through the motions. They deserve better. They deserve someone who sees them and fights for them and believes they're worth investing in. I helped him order the books, watched him set up an account with a bookseller, saw the way his hands shook slightly when he entered his payment information. Not from hesitation, but from emotion, from the weight of finally using his privilege for something meaningful. Thank you, he said when it was done, for helping with this, for sharing your expertise, for treating me like a colleague instead of just your fuck-up brother who's trying to reinvent himself. You're not a fuck-up, I said. You're just someone who took a wrong turn and had the courage to find your way back. Thanksgiving came around again, marking a year since the dinner that had changed everything. Elena and I hosted again, but this time it felt different, less like a test and more like a gathering, an actual coming together of people who'd done the hard work of becoming real with each other. Derek showed up early to help cook, something he'd never done before. He worked alongside Elena in the kitchen, chopping vegetables and following her instructions with the humble competence of someone who'd learned to take direction without ego. You've gotten good at this, Elena observed, watching him dice an onion with surprising precision. YouTube videos, Derek admitted. I'm learning how to cook, how to fix things around the house, how to do all the basic life stuff I'd outsourced because I was too busy being successful. Turns out there's satisfaction in competence, even mundane competence, especially mundane competence. My parents arrived with genuine smiles and none of the stiffness from last year. My mother hugged me tightly, whispering, "I'm so proud of you," into my ear. My father shook my hand and then, awkwardly, pulled me into a brief embrace. "Your mother's been working with a therapist," he said quietly, "dealing with some things. She wanted me to tell you that she's trying to be better. We both are." "I can see that," I said. "Thank you for trying." Jennifer and the kids arrived last, carrying pies and the chaos that came with children who'd been cooped up in a car. Emma immediately attached herself to Elena, talking nonstop about school and friends and a book she'd read that made her cry. Jackson found the shelf where I kept my science fiction collection and settled in with a worn paperback, completely absorbed. We gathered around the same table as last year, but everything was different. The food was the same, turkey and stuffing and all the traditional dishes, but the conversation was new, real, unguarded. Derek talked about his students, his voice full of affection and frustration and hope. Jennifer talked about going back to school herself, pursuing a degree in social work she'd put on hold when Emma was born. My mother talked about her therapy, about recognizing patterns she'd replicated from her own childhood, about trying to break cycles of harm. My father, surprisingly, talked about retirement, about how he'd spent 40 years working in finance and had nothing to show for it except money and regrets. "I don't know who I am without work," he said quietly. "I don't know what I like, what matters to me, what I'd do with time if I had it." Watching Derek figure that out made me realize I never did. "It's not too late," Derek said gently. "I'm 44 and just now learning how to live." "You've got time, Dad." "Maybe," my father said. "Maybe I'll try." After dinner, we moved to the living room. The kids played with some toys we'd gotten for them, and the adults sat with coffee and pie, full and content, the conversation drifting into comfortable silence. "I want to say something," Derek said suddenly, setting down his coffee cup. "I want to thank all of you, Michael especially, for not giving up on me. A year ago, I was a different person, worse person, someone who measured his worth in achievements and made everyone around him feel small to make himself feel big. And you all could have walked away. You should have walked away, but you didn't. You did the work," I said. "We just witnessed it." "No," Derek said. "You made the work possible. You, Michael, by showing me what a life built on meaning looked like. You, Elena, by being fair when you could have been vindictive. You, Jennifer, by staying when you could have left. You, Mom and Dad, by finally seeing me, really seeing me, and loving me anyway. He was crying now, open and unashamed. I'm happier than I've ever been. I make a fraction of what I used to make. I have no title, no status, no markers of traditional success. And I'm so fucking happy it almost scares me. Because it means all those years I spent climbing and achieving and sacrificing, they were wasted. I was miserable and didn't even know it because I was too busy performing success to notice I had no actual life. They weren't wasted, Elena said gently. They brought you here. To this moment, this realization, this new beginning, everything we survive becomes part of our foundation. She's right, I added. You had to be the old Derek to become the new one. You had to hit bottom to know which way was up. Derek wiped his eyes, laughing a little. How did you get so wise, little brother? I'm not wise, I said, echoing what I told him before. I'm just clear about what matters. And you're getting there too. Later, after everyone had left and Elena and I were cleaning up, she said, your family has come a long way. We have, I agreed. It's not perfect. It's probably never going to be perfect. But it's real now. Honest. Built on who we actually are instead of who we thought we should be. That's better than perfect, Elena said, wrapping her arms around me from behind, resting her chin on my shoulder. Perfect is performance. Real is connection. I'll take real any day. We stood like that for a while, wrapped up in each other, the city glittering outside our windows, the life we'd built surrounding us like a promise kept. And I thought about Derek, about his transformation, about the courage it took to start over, about how people could change if they were brave enough to face who they'd been and wise enough to let it go. I thought about my family, broken and rebuilding, imperfect and trying, finally seeing each other instead of just the roles we'd played for decades. And I thought about Elena, my wife, my partner, my home, who'd seen me when I was invisible to everyone else, who'd loved me when I didn't know I was worth loving, who taught me that fairness was strength and softness was courage. I had enough. I had more than enough. I had everything that mattered, and for the first time in my life, I knew my family saw it too. Spring came early the following year, arriving in March with unexpected warmth and the kind of light that made the city look like it was made of gold. Elena and I had fallen into routines that felt less like habits and more like chosen rituals. Sunday mornings at our coffee shop, evening walks along the river, Friday nights cooking together while music played, and the world outside our windows faded into irrelevance. Life had settled into something I'd never expected to have. Peace, not the absence of struggle, but the presence of certainty. The bone-deep knowledge that I was exactly where I was supposed to be, living exactly as I was meant to live. Derek had completed his teaching certification in December and was now a full-time English teacher at the same public high school where he'd been volunteering. He called me every few weeks with stories about Marcus, who'd written a college essay so powerful it made Derek cry, about a girl named Aisha who'd discovered poetry and was now filling notebooks with verses about her neighborhood and her grandmother, and the way light looked filtering through chain-link fences. I'm thinking about starting a creative writing club, Derek said one afternoon in late March. He'd stopped by the library on his way home from school, looking tired but radiant in the way people look when they're exhausted from meaningful work. After school, maybe twice a week, a space for kids who want to write but don't fit the traditional academic mold. Kids who have stories but no one's taught them how to shape them into something they can share. That sounds perfect, I said. You'll be good at that. I don't know about good, Derek said, but I care. That has to count for something. It counts for everything, I said. We were sitting in the break room, sharing terrible coffee from the library's ancient machine, and Derek looked at me with something like wonder. How is this my life, he said. A year and a half ago, I was having a heart attack in my office because I couldn't admit I needed help. Now I'm sitting in a library break room with my brother, drinking shit coffee, talking about starting a creative writing club for teenagers. It's such a small life compared to what I had, And it's the best thing that's ever happened to me. It's not small, I said. It's just measured differently. You're right, Derek said. I keep having to remind myself that impact isn't about scale, that changing one kid's life is worth more than optimizing 100 quarterly reports, that being present for my own children is success, even if no one writes an article about it. Are you happy? I asked. It was a question I'd asked him before, but the answer kept evolving. Derek thought about it, really thought about it, the way he approached everything now, with deliberation and honesty instead of the quick, polished responses he used to give. I'm happy in a way I didn't know was possible, he said finally. Like, I used to think happiness was achievement, the next promotion, the next bonus, the next recognition. And I'd get those things and feel nothing, or feel satisfied for maybe 5 minutes before I was already thinking about the next goal. But now I'm happy in moments. When Marcus raises his hand and shares an insight. When Emma tells me about her day and actually wants to hear about mine. When Jennifer and I sit on the couch at night and just exist together without needing to perform or achieve or be anything other than two people who chose each other. He paused, his coffee cup cradled in both hands like he was warming himself. I'm happy in the quiet spaces, in the ordinary moments, in the life I'm actually living instead of the life I thought I should be living. That's new. That's everything. In April, Derek invited me to speak to his creative writing club. Some of them want to be writers, he explained, but they don't know any writers, don't have any models for what that life looks like. And I thought, you're not a writer exactly, but you're someone who built a life around books and stories. Someone who found meaning in helping other people find their stories. I think they'd benefit from meeting you. So I went, one Thursday afternoon, to a classroom that smelled like dry erase markers and teenager, where 15 kids sat in a circle looking at me with varying degrees of interest and skepticism. This is my brother Michael, Derek said. He's a librarian. He's going to talk to you about stories and why they matter. I'd prepared some remarks about books and reading and the power of narrative, but when I looked at these kids, some eager, some defensive, all of them carrying weights I couldn't see, I abandoned the script. I was told I was a failure for most of my life, I said instead, by my family, by people who measured success in money and titles and markers of conventional achievement. I became a librarian, a job that pays minimum wage and has no prestige and doesn't show up on anyone's list of impressive careers. And for a long time, I believed them. I believed I'd failed because I chose books over business, meaning over money, helping people over climbing ladders. The kids were listening now, their skepticism replaced by something like recognition. But here's what I learned, I continued. The people who called me a failure were measuring me by metrics that didn't matter. They were judging my life by their values instead of mine. And once I stopped accepting their measurements, once I decided to define success for myself, everything changed. Not my circumstances. I still had the same job, the same apartment, the same life. But my relationship to that life changed. I stopped apologizing for it and started celebrating it. A girl in the back raised her hand. How did you do that? Stop caring what people thought? I didn't stop caring, I said honestly. It still hurt when my family made comments about my life. But I found people who saw me differently. Friends who valued what I valued. A partner who loved me for exactly who I was. And their vision of me was so strong, so genuine, that eventually I started seeing myself through their eyes instead of through the eyes of people who'd never understood me. But what if you don't have those people? A boy asked. What if everyone in your life thinks you are wasting your potential or making bad choices? Then you find new people, I said, or you become so certain of your own worth that their doubt can't touch you. Or if you're lucky, you do both. Derek was watching me with tears in his eyes, and I realized this wasn't just about the kids. This was about him too, about the journey he'd taken from measuring himself by external metrics to finding internal certainty. Can I tell you about my brother? I said to the class, the one who introduced me just now. Derek looked alarmed, but I pressed on. A year and a half ago, he was a corporate VP, six-figure salary, big title, all the markers of success. He was also miserable. He'd built a life around achievement and lost himself in the process. Then he had a heart attack, literally. His heart gave out from the strain of trying to be someone he wasn't. And you know what he did? The kids were riveted now. He quit, walked away from the mom, the money, the status, started over from scratch, went back to school to become a teacher, took a massive pay cut to work with kids like you in a school the city has basically abandoned. And now he's the happiest I've ever seen him because he's living his values instead of performing someone else's. I looked at Derek. That takes more courage than climbing any corporate ladder. It takes more strength than achieving any conventional success. My brother is my hero, not because of who he was, but because of who he became. Derek was crying openly now, not hiding it, letting these kids see that teachers were human, that vulnerability was strength, that transformation was possible. After the session, several kids stayed to talk. Marcus told me about a library in his neighborhood that had saved him when his home life was unbearable. Aisha showed me her poetry notebook, her hands shaking as she shared verses she'd written about her sister who'd died. A quiet boy named James asked if it was too late to change, if you'd already made mistakes, if you'd already hurt people, if you were already 17 and felt like your path was set. It's never too late, I told him. My brother was 43 when he started over. I was 30 when I finally stopped apologizing for who I was. You're 17. You have time to become whoever you want to be. You just have to be brave enough to try. That evening, Derek and I had dinner at a small Thai place near his house. Just the two of us, brothers breaking bread, finding our way to something that felt like friendship. Thank you for today, Derek said, for what you said to the kids, for what you said about me. I meant it. I know you did. That's what made it powerful. He picked at his pad thai, organizing his thoughts. I've been thinking about that Thanksgiving dinner, the one where you told everyone about Elena, about how that was the beginning of everything changing. Okay, I said. I used to think about it as the day you humiliated me, Derek said. The day you revealed that you'd won some competition that I didn't even know we were having. But that's not what happened, is it? What do you think happened? I think you finally stood up for yourself, Derek said. After 32 years of absorbing my comments, my comparisons, my casual cruelties, you finally said enough. You set a boundary. You showed me who you actually were instead of who I decided you were. And it terrified me because it meant I'd been wrong about everything. You weren't wrong about everything, I said gently. I was wrong about what mattered, Derek said. I was wrong about success and worth and what made a life meaningful. I was wrong about you. And being forced to confront that wrongness, that was the gift, Michael. The painful, necessary gift that saved my life. We ate in silence for a while, comfortable now where it used to be tense. Can I tell you something I've never told anyone? Derek said finally. Always. When I was in the hospital, after the heart attack, I had this moment of absolute clarity. I was lying there with tubes in my chest and monitors beeping and the very real possibility that I might die. And all I could think was, what have I done with my life? And the answer was nothing. Nothing that mattered. I'd made money and earned titles and impressed people who didn't actually know me. But I hadn't created anything beautiful, hadn't helped anyone, hadn't built relationships that would outlast my resume. I'd spent 43 years optimizing my life for success and had completely missed the point of living. And now, I asked? Now I'm creating something beautiful, Derek said. Every day, in my classroom with those kids, teaching them that their stories matter, that they matter, watching them discover their own voices. That's beautiful, Michael. That's worth dying for, which means it's worth living for too. I'm proud of you, I said, not for the transformation, that was necessary, not impressive, but for the courage to sustain it, for not sliding back into old patterns when things got hard, for choosing meaning over metrics every single day. I learned from the best, Derek said, and his smile was genuine, unguarded, the smile of someone who'd finally figured out how to be himself. In May, Elena and I received an invitation in the mail. Heavy cardstock, expensive printing, my mother's handwriting on the envelope. You are invited to a celebration of renewal, honoring the journey of growth and healing. Please join us as we celebrate becoming. It was for a party my parents were throwing, not for any specific occasion, but as a deliberate marking of change, an acknowledgement that they'd done work and wanted to celebrate the progress. Are you surprised? Elena asked, reading over my shoulder. Completely, I admitted. My parents don't do things like this. They don't talk about feelings or growth or healing. They just endure, silently, stoically. People change, Elena said. Look at Derek. Look at your mom learning to see you. Maybe your dad is changing too, in his own way, at his own pace. The party was at their house, the one I'd grown up in, the one that held so many complicated memories. But when we arrived, something was different. The formal living room, the one we'd never been allowed to play in as children, had been rearranged. The antique furniture was gone, replaced with comfortable couches and chairs arranged for conversation rather than display. Photos covered the walls now. Not formal family portraits, but candid shots from throughout the years. Derek and me as children, building a fort in the backyard. Family vacations I'd forgotten about. Recent pictures too, from Easter dinner, from Derek's classroom, from my wedding. My mother greeted us at the door and she looked different. Lighter somehow, despite being the same physical person. Thank you for coming, she said, hugging me tightly. This means everything. What is this? I asked, gesturing at the transformed room, the gathering of people I half recognized. Family friends, my parents' neighbors, people from their church. It's a celebration, my mother said. Your father and I have been in therapy together for 6 months now, working through things, old patterns, old wounds, the ways we parented you and Derek that caused harm. And our therapist suggested we mark the progress, acknowledge the work, celebrate the courage it takes to change when you're in your 60s and you thought you were done growing. My father appeared then, looking uncomfortable in the way he always looked when emotions were being discussed, but also determined. Son, he said, and then he hugged me, a real hug, not the stiff, brief thing from Thanksgiving. I'm glad you're here. I want to talk to you, both of you. He looked at Derek, who'd arrived with Jennifer and the kids. We gathered in that transformed living room, my father standing awkwardly in the center while my mother sat on the arm of a chair, her hand resting on his shoulder. I'm not good at this, my father started. Talking about feelings, being vulnerable. Your mother can tell you I've been terrible at it for 40 years of marriage, but I'm trying to learn because I'm realizing that my silence, my inability to express emotion, my focus on providing instead of connecting, these things hurt you, both of you, in different ways. He looked at Derek. I pushed you to achieve because I thought that's what love looked like. Wanting more for you, better for you, creating expectations that would drive you to excellence. But all I did was make you feel like you were never enough, like nothing you did was sufficient, and that pressure almost killed you. Derek's jaw was tight, but he nodded. My father turned to me. And you, Michael, I ignored you. Not intentionally, not maliciously, but I ignored you because you weren't the high achiever, weren't the one I could brag about at work, weren't the son who made me look good. I treated you like you didn't matter as much as your brother, and that was cruel, unforgivably cruel. Dad, I started. Let me finish, he said. Please, I've been practicing this. My mother squeezed his shoulder encouragingly. I'm proud of you, my father said, his voice breaking. I'm proud of the man you've become, the life you've built, the values you hold. I'm proud that you found work you love and a partner who sees you and a way of living that brings you joy. I'm proud that you had the courage to define success for yourself instead of accepting the definition I tried to force on you. And I'm sorry, so profoundly sorry that I never told you this before. That you had to live 32 years without knowing that your father saw you and valued you and loved you exactly as you were. I couldn't speak. Tears were streaming down my face. Years of hurt and longing and the desperate hope for exactly these words finally being released. I don't expect you to forgive me, my father continued. I don't know if I deserve forgiveness, but I want you to know that I'm changing, that I'm learning how to be a father who shows up, who communicates, who loves openly instead of through silent provision. It's hard. It's the hardest thing I've ever done, but you're worth it. You've always been worth it. I just didn't know how to see it. He sat down abruptly, like the speech had taken everything out of him. My mother wrapped her arms around him, and they held each other while I tried to process what had just happened. Derek broke the silence. Thank you, Dad, for saying that, for doing the work. I know it's not easy for you, Bum. Nothing worthwhile is easy, my father said, his voice muffled against my mother's shoulder. I'm learning that. Better late than never, I suppose. I crossed the room and hugged my father, and he held on like I was a lifeline, like he'd been waiting decades for permission to hold his son and was making up for lost time. I love you, I said into his shoulder. I've always loved you. I just needed to hear that it went both ways. It does, my father said. It always has. I just didn't know how to say it. The party that followed was unlike any gathering my family had ever hosted. People told stories, funny ones, embarrassing ones, honest ones about struggle and growth and change. My mother talked about recognizing patterns from her own childhood, about how her mother had valued achievement over connection, and she'd replicated that without meaning to. Derek talked about his transformation, about hitting rock bottom and finding his way back. Jennifer talked about marriage and the courage it took to stay when things got hard, to believe in someone's potential to change. And I talked about Elena, about the coffee shop and spilled coffee, and finding someone who saw me as I was and loved me for it, about how that single relationship had changed everything. Not just my life, but my family's lives too. Because Elena's presence had forced us all to confront what we'd been avoiding for decades. Elena stood beside me while I talked, her hand in mine. And when I finished, she said, I want to add something, if that's okay. Everyone turned to her. When Michael first told me about his family, Elena said, I wanted to hate you. I wanted to fire Derek, write off his parents, build walls between Michael and the people who'd hurt him. But Michael wouldn't let me. He kept saying, they're still my family and people can change and everyone deserves a chance to grow. And I thought he was being naive, too soft, too willing to be hurt again. She squeezed my hand. But I was wrong because here we are a year and a half later, and you've all done the work. You've all changed. Not perfectly. Change is messy and nonlinear and full of setbacks, but you've changed enough. You've become people who can sit in a room together and tell the truth and celebrate the courage it takes to be vulnerable. And that's extraordinary. That's rare. That's worth honoring. My mother was crying again. My father was looking at Elena with something like awe. Derek had his arm around Jennifer, both of them smiling. So thank you, Elena continued. Thank you for proving that families can heal, that people can grow, that it's never too late to become who you should have been all along. Michael deserves this, deserves all of you at your best, and I'm grateful you're finally giving it to him. Later, after the party had wound down and most people had left, Derek and I stood in the backyard where we'd played as children. The old swing set was gone, replaced by a garden my mother had started, herbs and vegetables and flowers all growing together in organized chaos. Do you remember when we built that fort? Derek asked, pointing to the corner of the yard where our childhood architecture had once stood. I remember you built the fort and let me hand you nails, I said. That's not how I remember it, Derek said. I remember us building it together. You had ideas I never would have thought of, like putting the door on the side instead of the front so we could keep watch, or adding a roof that could be rolled back so we could see the stars. I'd forgotten that, I said. I'd forgotten most of our childhood, Derek admitted. The good parts, anyway. I remembered the competition, the comparisons, the slow slide into dysfunction. But I'd forgotten that there was a time before all that, when we were just brothers, when I looked up to you as much as you looked up to me. What changed, I asked. Derek thought about it. I think I got scared. Started comparing myself to other kids, measuring my worth in achievements. And once I started doing that, I couldn't stop. It infected everything, how I saw myself, how I saw you, how I moved through the world. I became someone who needed to win to feel okay. And anyone who wasn't competing with me wasn't worth paying attention to. And now? Now I'm trying to remember how to just be, Derek said, to exist without performing, to value connection over competition, to see people, really see them, instead of just assessing where they rank relative to me. He smiled. It's harder than it sounds. Everything worth doing is, I said. We stood in silence, watching the sun set over the garden, over the neighborhood, over the city beyond. I don't know if I've said this, Derek said quietly, but thank you for not giving up on me. For believing I could change even when I didn't believe it myself. For showing me what a life built on meaning looks like. You saved me, Michael. In every way that matters, you saved me. You saved yourself, I said. I just existed. You did the work. We both did the work, Derek said. Different work, but necessary. You learned to value yourself despite the world saying you weren't enough. I learned to value meaning despite the world saying achievement was everything. And somehow we met in the middle, found each other again, became the brothers we should have been all along. Elena appeared in the doorway. Ready to go home? She asked. Yeah, I said, and Derek and I walked back to the house together, side by side, brothers again, finally. That night, lying in bed with Elena, the city quiet outside our windows, I felt a sense of completeness I'd never experienced before. What are you thinking? Elena asked, her fingers tracing patterns on my chest. That I have everything, I said. Not everything in the material sense, though marrying you certainly didn't hurt in that department. But everything that matters. Connection, purpose, family that sees me, work that fulfills me, a partner who loves me. I'm rich in all the ways that count. You were always rich in the ways that count, Elena said. You just needed everyone else to see it too. No, I said, I needed to see it too. I needed to stop measuring my worth by their metrics and start measuring it by my own. That's what changed. Not their perception of me, but my perception of myself. When did that happen? Elena asked. When did you start seeing yourself the way I see you? I thought about it. I think it started in that coffee shop, when you spilled coffee and I gave you napkins and you looked at me like I'd done something extraordinary instead of something ordinary. Like kindness was remarkable, like I was worth noticing. And slowly, over months of friendship and then love, I started to believe it, started to see myself through your eyes instead of through theirs. And now? Now I don't need your eyes anymore, I said. I see it on my own, but I still love seeing myself reflected in how you look at me, in how Derek looks at me now, in how my parents are learning to look at me. Not because I need their validation, but because it feels good to be seen accurately, to have the internal and external finally match. Elena kissed me soft and slow. I'm proud of you, she said, for all of it, for building this life, for healing your family, for staying exactly who you are through all the chaos and change. I'm proud of me too, I said, and it felt revolutionary to say it, to claim my own worth without apology or qualification. I'm proud of the life I've built, the work I do, the man I've become, the family I've helped heal. All of it, I'm proud. We made love then, slow and tender, a celebration of everything we'd built together, everything we'd become. And afterward, wrapped in each other, I felt something I'd been searching for my whole life without knowing it. Peace. Not the absence of struggle, but the presence of certainty. The bone-deep knowledge that I was exactly where I was supposed to be, living exactly as I was meant to live, loved exactly as I deserved to be loved. I was enough. I had always been enough. I would always be enough. And finally, everyone else knew it too.